Okay, thank you. So,
Good evening.
Good evening, everyone. This is a continuation of Monday, March 4th's Board of Selectmen meeting in Wenham. We have just opened the meeting and have completed 2 separate executive sessions, and we are now in open session. And before we start the other agenda items, I would like to make a motion to act on one of the issues discussed in executive session, and that is the issue relative to our water superintendent. So I will make a motion. That's the way I feel today. I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen approve an employment agreement with Eric Mansfield as Water Superintendent of Wenham for a term beginning July 1, 2019 and ending June 30th, 2022. He'll have a base salary of $94,000. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second your motion.
Any further, well, no, I guess we can't have any further discussion.
No.
No,
Seeing
not
as
really.
it was an executive
Seeing as we did. So then, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that would be unanimous.
Thank you, Eric, for being with us and continuing on.
Okay, moving on to the, we're hopefully going to get through all the way through to new business pretty quickly tonight, so we can really spend the time on what's the bulk of what's here. That being said.
Jack is not here?
And I should say that Jack is not with us this evening, so John and I will be conducting the meeting with Peter and Catherine. The first item on our agenda, as always, public input items not on the agenda. Looking around, I don't believe there will be any, so we'll move on to announcements, which will sound very familiar. I have the announcements tonight. There are 4 of them, and I hope folks this is beginning to get on people's radar. The warrant hearing for our annual town meeting will be held in the Bessie Bucher Elementary Multipurpose Room, Bessie Bucher School, on Monday, April 1st at 7 p.m. On Saturday, April 6th at noon, the Wenham Village Improvement Society luncheon will be held at the Bessie Bucher Elementary Multipurpose Room. That is a lunch that is at no charge for Wenham residents, followed directly by our annual town meeting in the Perkins Auditorium, which begins at 1 p.m. Our annual town election will be held at Town Hall on Thursday, April 11th, as always, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Voters must be registered by March 15th, which is approaching, to vote in the annual town election. Please contact the town clerk's office for information on absentee voting, which will be available. People asked about this, will be available for our town elections, but of course not for the town meeting. You have to be there to vote. So that's it for announcements. Have people out there?
Wait, those went fast.
Yeah. The next thing on our agenda are reports. I don't think that we have any reports this evening. Is that a fair statement?
Peter?
Peter? Yes.
That is.
You all set?
Okay, yes. Open for business.
Okay.
Okay, so we have no reports.
Yep. I've got the next big item.
You've got the consent agenda.
Yeah, consent agenda. It couldn't be any more brief.
Yeah, we're going to
But I
brief
do
from the
have some
beginning.
minutes from January 15th, the executive session that are...
And you should have a motion.
Need to be
for the
approved,
beginning.
okay. I move to approve all items on the consent agenda as presented, including the release of the set number 2 of the executive session meeting minutes of January 15th, 2019.
So approve and release.
Correct. Is there a second to that motion?
I will second that motion.
Any discussion?
Nope.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye. That would be
Catherine,
unanimous.
that passes. All right.
Okay, we said we were going to try to get to new business.
Chugging right along.
And you have the first fairly straightforward motion.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry.
It's
I
like
didn't
we ought to have
realize
this
that.
one on a flashcard now.
Shoot, I missed that.
The first item is, so we, folks, remember we opened and closed the warrant last week.
Yes.
With some open issue, with quite a few open issues, with the intention to open it and close it again tonight, hopefully resolving many, many, many of the issues that are still open.
So we're back at it again. If you hadn't noticed,
Yeah.
our binders are a little bit lean this week.
They are?
Yeah, oh yeah. let's see, it's only about 2 reams of paper.
Yeah, okay.
So, we will reopen the meeting. I move the Board of Selectmen reopen the April 6th, 2019 annual town meeting warrant.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. That passes.
Okay, so the warrant is now open again. And the second item is actually, we're going to pass over. There's nothing to report relative to item C under new business. And there's no D. So now we're getting to old business, which is really where we want to be tonight.
Wow.
And that is a final review and recommendation votes on all.
This is pretty good. After last week, we're almost a half an hour ahead.
Well, when you meet like twice a week, you kind of, you get, the routine stuff gets pretty routine. So this is I will say, noble goal. This says that we will, on all warrant articles tonight in 90 minutes, but we're going for it. We'll get as far as we can possibly.
Without a third active party, you never know.
Yeah, we'll get as far as we
We'll need
can.
for you to crack the whip again?
I will. Hey,
A little bit harder this time?
I love that. It's a balance between actually talking about stuff. Okay, so Peter.
Yes.
Probably, there were a few articles that we passed over in the very beginning simply for process. And then there are a couple of articles that we might want to wait, or we may never get to the articles that we haven't even discussed. So I'm going to recommend that we, I think, quickly put on the warrant and take action if, let's see, wait a minute, let me see if I can remember your, so the things that are, everything that's not in red is on the warrant already.
Correct.
And the things that are green are things that action has been taken or recommended action has been voted upon.
Correct.
So
What
if
was
we
the first
started
color
with
again?
our red, so if there's something
Oh,
that's in
okay.
red,
Yeah,
it's
okay.
not even on the warrant.
As opposed to the green.
Right, so we could start at the beginning, which would be an interesting place to start. I'm not going to promise that we're going to go all the way straight through, but the Article 1 is the budget appropriation article. We have placed that on the warrant, and we deferred making a recommendation to town meeting simply because the Finance Committee had not had the opportunity to meet and make their recommendation. That was last Tuesday. I believe they met, I know they met last Wednesday. And as we can see on our handout, the green means that they have recommended favorable action on this article. So what's left for us, if we feel comfortable, is to recommend action. And if it's okay with you, John, since it's the same motion over and over again, I will just, in this case, make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article 1, budget appropriations.
I would second your motion.
Okay, do we have any further discussion on that?
Is there any more input from the Finance Committee, or is it just they've accepted it and
Yeah, so
everything's good?
They met and discussed.
Was there any major changes of any sort?
No major changes from the last time we met. I think to be clear, this is our full appropriation up to our levy limit for FY20.
Okay.
And then everything over and above that, as
Okay.
we talked about at length, is now structured into 2 separate warrant articles, 3 and 4, school operating override 1 and 2. Article 1 is contingent on the approval of Article 2 because we're using $700,000 of
right.
free cash on the revenue side to balance that
Got it.
budget.
But we don't have to say that, or the motion will say that.
No, this is the same process that we followed
Okay.
historically, but just
Okay.
big picture,
Yeah,
that is the reality.
Okay, no further discussion.
Okay, so the motion is to recommend, for the Board of Selectmen to recommend favorable action on Article 1. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. before we go on, let me ask, I have written all my notes on a handout that you gave us. I'm not sure when, but I have not, I've made the assumption that is the numbering is the same as in our book that we got tonight. I have this handout from, maybe I printed it,
From last
from an
week?
email that you sent after the,
Yes, the numbering is
after the
this-
FinCom.
Correct. We have
So
not
if I
changed that.
refer to Article 1,
Yep,
we all know what it is. Okay. So moving on that path, the Article 2 is the use of free cash to balance the budget. We did discuss this last week. You used $700,000. The Finance and Advisory Committee recommended favorable action. Is there any
Bless
new
you.
information, Peter, that we need on this?
no new information.
Okay, then I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article 2, use of free cash.
I will second your motion.
Okay, further discussion?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
If they could all be this quick. Okay. Article 3 is entitled Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 1. And this is the override that, as it says, the article that partially funds Wenham's annual assessment, but is one of 3 operating overrides for the school.
One
And
of 2 operating.
one of
operations.
2.
2, right.
Right. It includes everything in their budget, the balance of everything in their budget, except for what's in Article 4.
Correct.
And I
It's
say that only because we can't really identify what,
No, but it's
Those are-
intended to represent the level services budget separate from OPEB and the school resource officer, recognizing that ultimately that's, you know, within the school committee's discretion as to
Right.
how those funds are expended.
okay.
But that is the intent. That's what the dollar amount that will be represented at town meeting will represent.
Okay. And is there anything new from the FinCom that came from their discussion? The FinCom recommended favorable action on this override unanimously.
They did, it was 5-0 for favorable recommendation on this. It was 1-4 against favorable action for the other school operating override.
Okay, so we'll make a motion, then we can have some discussion. So I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to recommend favorable action on Article 4, Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 1.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, discussion?
I wish it was something less, but I don't know where we would go with that conversation at all at this point. So I don't think there isn't much. How about yourself?
Well, I think that's my point. I think the amount is in large part driven by our lack of funds and our levy limit. That does not, unfortunately, put me in favor or wanting to recommend favorable action for a different reason, not the amount, but for the same concern and question that I had last year about the $300,000 override is, as a taxpayer, as a select board member, I have no information on what our children our students will lose or not have, our school district will not have if this override doesn't pass. So it's very hard to make a judgment on whether or
Correct.
not I think it's a good idea when I know it's a lot of money and it's going to have some impact.
Yeah.
But perhaps not as, I don't know.
Right. And there was that list that was produced and discussed at the school committee meeting of about 1.3 or $1.4 million, which would be the net effect.
Maybe.
Maybe, but it was it was not directly tied to
No.
this in any way, shape, or form.
And was not voted on by the school committee, and I don't recall that it was even a very, robust discussion. Trying to remember the meeting, I think I watched that one, I don't even recall if there was a discussion. It was in their packet.
Yep.
So, I mean, I've got the same issue that I had last year. This could be very well necessary, but
but you have no idea.
I have no idea.
Yep.
So that's just, where I'm coming from on that. Not inclined to recommend favorable action, because I can't. I don't know what I'm recommending favorable action on.
The whole school budgeting process and so forth has made me very uncomfortable for a number of years now. Not that it was great before, but I don't see that I not only see it has not improved, it's probably gotten worse, but to do things in the dark makes no sense to me whatsoever.
And I'm sensing a heightening of defensiveness, in a sense. I mean, we had our joint meeting, and we didn't even really talk much about the specifics of this, but when we did ask some questions, can you give us information about the SRO or the OPEB? The answer I remember was a very short answer, and I gave a really great presentation, says the person presenting, and you should watch it on the video.
That's not how you run
that really didn't resonate with me. So I don't need to discuss this any further.
Nope. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. So the motion is to recommend favorable action on this article. So all in favor of recommending favorable action, raise your hand.
Aye.
So 1 in favor. All opposed to recommending favorable action, that would be me. And since that's all of us, we have no abstentions. That was Article 3.
Mm-hmm.
Article,
I'm sorry, you had said 4.
did I say 4? It was 3. Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 1, which is Article 3. I may have said 4. No, my fault. I should check these off. The next article on this list is Article 4, and it's the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 2, which, as Peter just mentioned, although we can't mandate that it's used for these purposes, it's indicated for OPEB and the school resource officer, primarily so that there can be a discussion at the town meeting about those particular, the funding of those particular things, and call them out separately and get some explanation. So those two things, $89,875 our share for OPEB and $26,244 for a school resource officer, gives Wenham's share of $116,119 for those two things. And the Finance Committee, this one recommended favorable action 1 to 4. So is this, did we do this this way this year, or last year did we recommend?
I think we actually had unfavorable last time, but
I feel like that's clearer. Do we need to make that decision now, or can we take our vote?
I think it's probably best to mirror whatever the Finance Committee did, so I'd suggest following that same format of making a motion on favorable action, because otherwise it, I think, probably is more confusing for residents trying to understand the positions.
Got it.
The motion was to recommend favorable action.
I'm not,
Okay.
I did not.
Okay.
I was not clear on it. Thank you very much.
So, yeah, we did last year. We don't get into a situation of not recommending favorable action very often, but we did last year. Board of Selectmen do not recommend favorable action.
Is there a way to redo that?
Oh, I think we have to rescind our vote, if you would like to, although, have we? Yeah, we voted. I see your point about wanting to be consistent with the Finance Committee, but I don't think this is the clearest way to present it to town meeting.
I don't disagree.
That's confusing.
I don't disagree.
So what discretion do we have? The substance and the intent of the vote will be the same. But if
The Finance Committee would have to meet again, and it wouldn't be in the warrant book. This is what's gonna, what is it? here now would be what's in the warrant book.
So this is the last shot.
Representing the FinCom's position.
This is the last shot at it.
Well, this is the
Before printing.
wording, so we don't even have we don't have any leeway with the wording of that, you're
No,
saying.
because that was.
That was the motion
That was
they
the
made.
motion, and that was,
Boy, oh boy.
Patty, if I'm just correct, the motion was favorable action.
Yeah, the motion was initially made for favorable action, and then once the discussion came, it failed. So they will not recommend that article.
So
Right.
Right, but
it
the
failed a
motion-
motion for favorable action.
But the way,
Was the
the
motion
way,
favorable
the way
after
it's
that?
presented,
Right.
it's deceptive. It's not
Well, it's
clear.
not deceptive, it's just
Yeah.
not clear.
Yeah, it's
We
not
had the
clear.
discussion last year, so
We did.
I think
Call it what
that
you want, it's not clear.
if we're going to, but we don't really want to send out a warrant book with no recommendations in it, so we may have to do some, our moderator, or we may have to do more explanation that night, day, morning, afternoon. But let's be clear on this one. The motion I made was to recommend favorable action, and you voted in the affirmative. Would you like to change that?
I would like to change that, now that I clearly understand.
So I think the cleanest way to do that, somebody correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of people in here who could correct me if I'm wrong, I think the best thing for us to do is for me to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen rescind its previous vote
Vote on
relative
this
to
item.
Article 3.
And then re-vote again.
And so I will make the motion that we rescind our vote on Article 3. And is there a second?
I would second that
All in
motion.
favor?
All, aye.
Aye. So, let's start again. We won't have to do the discussion this time, but the motion is to recommend and move that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 1. Does that make,
I
Makes sense?
understand it now. That's why
Okay.
I'm quiet.
okay, so, all in favor of recommending favorable action, say aye. 0. All opposed to recommending favorable action, raise your
Aye.
aye. 2 opposed. So did that, so we have, it will be consistent with the next one. So 2 selectmen have recommended not favorable action, against favorable action. Okay, thought this could be smooth.
That is so weird a way of putting things.
Well, yeah. Motions are typically in the affirmative when they're made,
Right, that's, I think that's the other part of the, that's why I
But-
refer
But you
to
also
it as
don't
dis-
necessarily know where you're gonna
but you
end up
don't know
when
where you're going to
making
end
the
up.
motion.
Right.
Right.
So, moving on to Article 4.
Okay, go ahead.
Article 4 is, I think I said this already, the operating override number 2, designated for OPEB and school resource officer. We understand that that's under the school district's discretion, but for our purposes to have the discussion around those amounts, which total $116,119 for Wenham share, it's a separate article on our warrant. In this case, the Finance and Advisory Committee have, again, recommended against favorable action. So the motion for favorable action, 1 person agreed, 4 people did not agree with favorable action. Am I reading that correct?
Got it.
Okay. Do we, did I make that motion?
No, you don't.
Okay. So I will move that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on Article number 4, entitled Hamilton Wenham Regional School District Operating Override Number 2. Oh, all in favor of recommending favorable action on this article, raise your hand. That would be 0. All in favor of, all not in favor of recommending favorable action, raise your hand.
Aye.
So there are 2 of us.
Yes,
So that
and
would be 0 to 0, if
My
I,
comment to this item, the article, is that I wish the town of Wenham was so flush that they could put this kind of money towards the OPEB.
and I guess I,
It's a very important issue to deal with, but for them to just come out of nowhere and drop it on the table at the enormous number they're doing it at, and then, I forget what's the forecast for next year? It's double that or something?
Another 250,000, yeah, it's increasing it by $250,000 over the next 5 fiscal years, year over year. Which is, as we've talked about, looking at Wenham's share of that, that's, on the order of 20% of our new levy capacity year over year, off the top.
This is outrageous.
So apparently some thought has gone into a policy. It's just not a policy that's in any way, shape, or form, I don't think, affordable for Wenham. Hence the recommendation. Okay, Article number 5, we have already put on the warrant, and both boards have already voted for a recommendation. Is that
Favorable.
correct?
Correct.
Can we just, you need to hear that again, or can
Nope.
I skip over it?
Nope.
Article 6 is an article for cemetery maintenance fund transfer, and we did not make a recommendation, although we did put it on the warrant, and I know Peter's going to remind us why we did not make a
Yeah,
recommendation.
I
The
didn't.
cemetery commission was due to vote the following day
Right.
on the amount.
There you go.
And they then met last Wednesday, and they agreed on leaving that same figure, the $7,500 based on their budget and the amount of subsidy that they were able to provide to the highway department for maintaining the
maintenance.
cemeteries. Yep.
Okay, so, again, the Finance and Advisory Committee discussed this, apparently, and have voted favorable action unanimously to recommend favorable action. It's now up to us, it's on the warrant. The motion before us is for the Board of Selectmen to recommend, a motion for the Board of Selectmen to recommend favorable action on Article number 6, Cemetery Maintenance Fund Transfer. Is there a second?
I would second the motion.
Do you have any further discussion on this?
Nope, it's the right
Okay.
thing to do.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So 2 in favor. Oh, okay, I needed to turn the page. Article 7 is a roadwork Chapter 90 funding. We have already put that article on the warrant, and both Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee have recommended favorable action, so we're done with that one. Same is true of 8, 9, and 10.
Yep.
Do you need for me to say what those are, Catherine?
Kathleen?
No? So, to recap, we put those on the warrant and have recommended favorable action on
Okay.
all of those. Article 11 is a bylaw amendment, iron rail rental revolving fund. Again, we've already placed that on the warrant, and both boards of Selectmen and the Finance and Advisory Committee have taken their votes for favorable action, so we can pass over that. And here's where it gets interesting. Knowing that we must come back to this, even if we haven't finished everything else, I think we must come back to this before we close the warrant again, but knowing that we're meeting tomorrow, I'm going to recommend that we skip over Article 12, which is CPA appropriations, only because it's complicated, and we've spent several nights on it, and there are a lot of articles that we haven't even discussed. So I'm going to recommend that we make sure we come back to it, but we have tonight
Come
and
back to
tomorrow
it.
night.
Tonight or tomorrow, okay.
Right.
That's-
We have not.
That's fair.
Just to be clear, we did not put it on the agenda because on the warrant, because there still are a little bit, several open issues that we needed to have counsel about. And so the intention is to revisit that, and we will.
You're talking just about the one,
About, we didn't,
everything else is on the warrant,
Ex-
and
Except the most important one.
except for the maple ones.
well, and, right, everything is on the warrant. We have not yet, except for number 3.
Right.
And we have not made a recommendation for number 3.
On any
or-
but the first one. Just the first one was the only recommendation both at the board.
Right. So we have some work to do on that one. But, Article number 13 is, we've had a presentation on this, but I think there's some late-breaking information. This is the bylaw amendment for the Historic District Commission / Historical Commission. So Peter, if you can bring us up to speed on what's the
Yes,
latest
I will
there.
certainly do my best. What the end result of the proposed bylaw for the Historic District Commission and the Historical Commission is that there was, as initially drafted, there was an attempt not just to separate the duties and responsibilities of the two entities that were kind of conflated the way the bylaw is written now, but also to add an ability to enforce, and also, based on the feedback from the board, try to have a local appeal process when and if enforcement was put in place. And ultimately, where we ended up on that issue, unfortunately, is that the statute is pretty clear that the so-called local appeals process actually goes to the regional planning agency, to the MAPC.
Not so local.
Not so local, pretty unwieldy and very expensive. They require, I think, a $1,500 filing fee to appeal a decision.
Gee.
Clearly a
Cheaper.
pretty strong deterrent. So shockingly, they haven't got many, if any, appeals.
Yeah, right.
Which would defeat the purpose that we were trying to attain. So with that in mind, the Historic District Commission met earlier this evening, I believe. An hour ago. And
Late-breaking.
there we go. And voted to support the modified, reduced scope proposed bylaw amendment, which would just serve to clarify the roles and responsibilities of the Historic District Commission from that of the Historical Commission. If there are any other questions?
So is that all of Article 13?
That is. And that latest version is what is in your packets and what is available online. So
Which is not necessarily what I have here. Is that correct? Okay. So I'm going to make a small assumption that most of it is the same, and I just had a couple of questions. I'm fully in support of the clarification. Not sure how it got unclarified, but certainly needs clarification. But I had two questions, which I'm hoping are still in here, otherwise they're going to be silly questions. It's a clarification in the, what was section, the new section 1 on mine.
It should be the same.
It should be the same. It says, the purpose of this bylaw is to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the preservation and protection of the distinctive characteristics of buildings and places significant in the history of the town of Wenham or their architecture, and through the maintenance and improvement of settings, et cetera, et cetera. Absolutely, totally agree. So that's the purpose. But I feel as if it would be clearer if in the very beginning of this article, it stated that this article and those, the purpose of this bylaw is to do those things within the historic district, which I think is what it's trying to say. So all of those cultural, economic, social, general welfare, protection and preservation in this first part of it are pertain to things in the historic district, which I think it actually says later on in the article.
It says it in section 2.
It says there is hereby established under the provision a historic district. But it doesn't really say that the purpose of this article is to do all of those things within the historic district.
If I may.
Yep.
Can you? This is like Groundhog Day #3 now.
Yeah, just because we've been looking at several other communities' historic district bylaws, the clarity of having section 1 be separate from section 2 is that if we were to ever add an additional historic district, Section 2 only establishes the current historic district, but we would then want to be able to add other, because you don't have to have just one. Salem, I think, has 8. So there is a reason to keep the like historic district title, Section 1 and then Section 2 separate to that end. And I believe this is pulled right from the Chapter 40C MGL. Maybe not the clearest Mass General Law, but I think...
Shocking.
Yeah, no kidding, right? That's what I look for when I look for clarity is Mass General Law. So I think that's why. So if in the circumstance that the Historical Commission ever put forth to town meeting another historic district, that second historic district would still be able to fall under this bylaw and just be created under another subsection, if that makes sense.
It does, and I wasn't recommending changing them. I was just recommending, and I'm not going to say anything more than just this, because it's pretty minor, is that there's nothing here that I can read that says that all of these... Good night, Harriet. All of these terms refer to the historic district. That this bylaw is giving these, is promoting educational culture in the
Sure.
historic district as defined in Section 2.
Yeah. Oh, no, I was just wanting to clarify the 1
so
and
I
2
get that.
separation piece.
Yeah, definitely think
Yeah.
they should be
And
separated.
if you look at Section 1 of, under the Historical Commission, it is broad, but again, I
So it's not clear to me
Interesting.
in that one,
Yep.
does the Historical Commission have authority over everything, including the historic district?
yeah,
That's-
it does. It says
So
for the
then
town of Wenham.
So,
Town of Wenham, period.
period.
Yeah.
Which is what it says.
Yep.
Right? Okay, the other question that I have, and I probably, and this is, I'm sure was in the original bylaw, but it was a question I still have, has a little bit of a oddity, I think. In addition to the organizations, which, this is Section 3. It talks about the commission with the powers and duties provided by statute, 7 members, appointed for a term of 3 years, all of that. And then it says, provided, however, that in addition to the organizations which Section 4 of such statute designates, the Wenham Village Improvement Society may submit nominees for membership in the commission. Does anyone have any idea why a non-municipal entity, again, it might have been here since well, not 1643, but 1800 something. And I know that I don't know the answer to that question.
I'm guessing that was something that was political to make it palatable at the time.
Oh.
But that's just my own
That's not
conjecture.
new- That's not new. It's
No,
been
that's
there.
not new. That's been there, probably was there originally. So it is unique to Wenham, but that would be my best guess
All right.
as to why that one always
So we could have, well, submit nominees for membership
It's
in the
just that they
committee.
can nominate.
So we're still appointing them. We could include nominees or suggestions from we could get letters of interest that came from the Wenham Village Improvement Society.
It just says that
Just-
they may submit nominees.
Someday, at another meeting, I will ask about that. Is it reasonable to request that Section 1 just make some reference to the historic district? And then I'm,
Yeah, we can
okay.
get some language in there
And,
and then we can bring
It's-
it back tomorrow night.
oh, yeah, that's fine. I was actually ready to vote favorable action with an amendment, but I've forgotten that
Can we do
we're
it that way and put
meeting
it behind us?
tomorrow night.
I think probably place it on the warrant and then we can.
Yeah, oh.
because it's, none of these from here on, nothing's,
Oh, okay.
has been placed
All
on
right.
the warrant.
So yes, so
Put it on the
let's
warrant,
at least do
and
that.
then we'll make those modifications, and then you
Okay,
can make a
okay.
recommendation tomorrow night.
So I'm going to move that the Board of Selectmen place Article 13, bylaw amendment, Historic District Commission / Historical Commission on the warrant for annual town meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we will revisit the recommendations tomorrow. If we meet every day, you know, we can just catch up on the things that we haven't. Okay,
I may like you guys, but
good.
maybe not quite
yeah,
that
right.
much.
An excellent thing to have. So Article 14, bylaw amendment penalties.
So can I make a suggestion
Absolutely.
in order to navigate this process? After last week's meeting and the discussion around the number of warrant articles that were currently under consideration,
Yes.
there was some request from the board
Yep,
to
I
provide
have that
Yes is your answer.
in my packet.
some feedback
Yeah.
on what would be kind of hierarchy of importance on the remaining articles.
Yeah.
And so suggest we might want to go in that order.
So,
And again, you know, certainly well within the board's discretion to put any of them on the warrant, but I just think in talking to the staff and the boards and committees that are impacted, that it might be helpful.
You know, there was also a suggestion to take some of these out of here and do a special meeting just for
well,
these type of items.
So, yeah.
notwithstanding that, I think you were saying that there were some that you felt needed to.
Yeah,
Still need to be in here.
There are certainly a couple that really need to be on the warrant
Okay.
without a whole lot of discretion.
And
And
you
then
know-
there's kind of the next tier of important but not urgent, and then the tier beyond that.
Yeah, 'cause I'd like to come to fruition on what we need to have on our agenda
That's,
for the town meeting.
yes, so.
And if there's some of these, then let's do those,
Yep.
and let's get that part buttoned up and get back to the CPA funds as well.
So if
So-
I'm sorry, go ahead. I'm just looking at your memo. Go ahead, it's your
Okay.
memo.
So, general bylaws, to start at the
Yes.
top.
Yep,
Is Article 26, which was the acceptance of, or is the acceptance of Settlers Lane as a public way. That development project has been completed. The request last year came in just a little too late to be included on last year's warrant. The one outstanding issue was the cleaning of the storm scepter catch
Oh, yeah,
basins, and that
yeah.
has been done by the developer to Beltag's satisfaction. And so I would suggest that of the half dozen general bylaws and kind of also other miscellaneous articles is top priority.
Okay. So,
so, that being said, I'll make the motion, we can discuss it. I
Sure.
will move that the Board of Selectmen place the article, now I'm gonna not talk numbers, references Article 26, but the acceptance of Settlers Lane as a public way on the warrant for town meeting.
I would second your motion.
Is there any discussion about that?
No, I think that's a fine thing to get done.
I agree. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So that's on the warrant. That's on the warrant. Now, we need a second motion, I guess.
Yep.
Move that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on this said article, acceptance of Settlers Lane
I'll
as a public.
second your motion.
Is there discussion on favorable action?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor of favorable action?
Aye.
Unanimous. So it's on the warrant and favorable action, and since it's not a financial article, it's not opined on by the FinCom.
Correct.
Okay, what do you got next?
Next one on the list, we'll call it number 25. We're still waiting on the language from town council on this because they're, with the reduction of an appointed board, per the MGL, there's a way that you have to phase it in appropriately. But essentially what this bylaw is looking to do is to reduce the number of Conservation Commission members from 7, as currently constituted, down to 5. This is at the request of the Conservation Commission. I think I'd sent out an email sometime in the past week letting the board know that Conservation Commission wasn't able to meet twice in February due to lack of quorum. So to continue that, an issue that has been front and center for the Conservation Commission over the past year plus and continues to be.
And what's the thought process and reason why?
The idea is that there is one member who has health issues that has not been able to attend. There's another vacancy on the commission, so effectively there are only 5 members who are active.
2 missing.
So
folks.
if there's, more than one that isn't able to attend a meeting, then they don't make quorum, and there are also times where members of the commission have to recuse themselves from particular issues.
And what is the length of time that these 2 members have been missing? Been a long time?
Yeah, so there is information.
ballpark.
We
No,
had
just let
that
me,
somewhere. It was,
let me, just give me a minute.
Sure.
Somewhere, here it is. The one member hasn't attended any meetings for the past calendar year of the Conservation
Okay.
Commission. There are, just to be clear, of the 6 current members, 4's terms are up this year. Essentially, the one, including the person who hasn't been able to attend any meetings of late, and so it would stagger just one of those members whose terms are expiring to not have a 3-year term. It would either be a 1 or a 2-year term. That's effectively how it would be phased in, so that there would be 2 terms expiring in 20, 2 in 21, and then 1 in 22.
To me, sometimes less is more, so, to bring it to 5, I think that's a reasonable number. You'll get a good mix of thoughts going on, but it's a little bit difficult, too, to get that many. Having to deal with 8 towns over in Ipswich for the Veterans Office, it's very, very difficult getting 8 people together. But we have no choice because we want to represent each municipality, so.
Yeah, I'll just say that under the Conservation Commission Act, we can set the number of members anywhere from 3 to 7.
Okay.
And we've always, or have historically had 7.
So the committee itself is recommending to bring it to 5, so.
That's their request.
so I understand the request, and I understand the concern, but I think I said this at an earlier meeting, and I probably should have followed up with a discussion with someone on the Concom. I think the problem that they're dealing with in making quorum right now is an aberration, certainly with a person who's been sick for a year. We have no provision to vacate that position. However, I think anyone could rationally justify a conversation to say to ask that person to no longer be on the commission. The vacancy, I hate to say it this way, and we're going to be coming up, and I've been looking at it, we have vacancies in several of our boards right now, and if we reduce the number of all the boards that we have vacancies in, we'd be doing this for more than one. So my ultimate question really is not quorum, because I think we can, with some work and in a little time, we can fix the intrinsic quorum problem. But I have not heard anyone opine on, does this in any way at all reduce the level, the broadness of expertise, which is a very, very technical committee?
Yep.
Is that a problem for anyone a potential problem that anyone could see on the COMCOM? Does it reduce the opinions? You still have the issue is if you have 5 people and 2 have to recuse themselves, is that an issue and who's on there in the makeup of the committee rather than the number. So if we feel this needs to be on the warrant, because I will, personally, I'm not in favor of this, but if we want to hear from the people.
Oh, you're not in favor of reducing?
I'm not, no, I would, because I don't think that we have, it doesn't appear to me that the town has, or the Concom, I shouldn't say it that way, it's not, I don't mean to say they're not doing whatever they need to do. But I think those are the two issues that they have right now, are issues that are not systemic and
Okay.
could ultimately.
No, that's fair.
be.
That's
But,
fair. No, it's fair, and I understand what you're saying. One of the first pieces of advice that I think it was Peter Hersey gave me when I first came on the board years ago, he said, one of the most important jobs you're going to have to do is continually beat the bushes and survey and find people who are willing to step up to the plate and fill the different positions for the committees, commissions, boards, et cetera. And he is very right. I do that almost everyday basis if I'm, it doesn't matter where I am or what I'm doing, whether it's a social gathering or a store.
Yeah.
So I'd be, you know.
I am a little bit torn on that. I don't want to be disrespectful to the Concom's recommendation.
But maybe.
On the other hand, I would like to, I guess I'd like to have a second shot at,
And maybe we should have a conversation with them. I think you're right. You
Well-
could do it as a chair, or you can do it and ask them to come and meet with us and say, hey, here's what we're thinking. Let's have that discussion.
I mean, I feel like we're not doing our job if we can't find a person
Correct. Yep,
for this.
that's right. Exactly
So,
correct.
and I think we might be able to step up our game a little bit on that. And I'm just in general going to make a commitment this year to fill all of our vacant positions in this appointment cycle, and there are several. So,
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
yes, certainly.
Would it be easier just to write a bylaw on if you miss so many meetings without an excuse?
We can't do that. We already talked about that last year. There are a number of appointed boards and committees that are precluded from having that kind of attendance requirement imposed on them as condition of continuing to serve on that committee. So we had asked town council for that last year, and they had said, yes, you can do that, except for all of these committees, which is like
All of them.
Most of them.
like eight of the most, important boards and committees. So
Another question, can conservation have associate members like the planning board?
That's another, that was a question I had, thank you.
That you asked that question at one point, because that would be the logical step, if it were possible, to solve some of this issue.
Mhm. Then you
we
solicit.
did ask the question.
Yeah.
I believe that the answer is no,
I
because
think it
we
is,
are
too.
going to be talking in a little bit about the associate member of the planning board, and we have tried to the greatest extent to maximize those kind of opportunities, to have somebody who would be ready to, to deal with quorum and be up to speed and have some exposure to serving on that board or committee. I believe the Wetlands Protection Act doesn't allow it.
I think that's,
From the WPA for sure?
Yeah.
I think that's true. I feel like we've had this conversation, and we certainly would have gone there,
Yep.
knowing that this was an issue. So, I guess the thing to do here, since it's been recommended, is,
How formal a request is this? Is this just
Well,
by
it's-
the 5 or 6 people on the
It's
board?
from the Conservation
yeah,
Commission, and
yeah,
they did
I'm sure it is.
meet on it, discuss it,
Mhm.
and request this change
Right.
be
Mm,
put on
that's-
a warrant article for
I
town.
guess that being said, we are going to not put on the warrant, most likely, other warrant articles that are bylaw amendments that are
Yeah.
possibly
And we could pick
requested
this
by
up again
boards
later.
of committee. And I think this is one that I feel like needs a little more time
Yep.
to resolve. And would, as a bylaw amendment, not go into effect until a couple of months after town meeting.
Correct. It would go into effect.
The point of my question was
Following.
not to castigate the commission itself, but there's not 50 people behind this that signed a petition saying, oh, yeah, we ought to put this on the
No.
town meeting warrant.
I understand the earnestness of the concern.
Sure,
I guess I would just
absolutely.
like to have, as part of the appointing body, an opportunity to fix this problem other ways
Mhm.
before we make the permanent change.
Yep. Fair, very fair.
Since these are before us, even though we may not be talking about them, since we've talked about this, is it probably cleaner to vote whether or not to put this on the warrant?
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that way it's
This way
clear
it's
for the
clear.
record and
Yeah.
clear for everybody involved. Yep.
Go for it.
So I will make a motion in the affirmative that the Board of Selectmen place on the warrant article referred to as Article 25, but is called the Bylaw Amendment Reduction in Number of Conservation Commission Members from 7 to 5. So,
Well, I thought you would say you do not want that.
well, I'm making the motion in the affirmative. So if you
Oh.
do not want this on the
Oh,
warrant
oh,
for this meeting,
Here we
then
go.
when we take a vote, you will vote no. And if you do want this on the
I
warrant,
get
you'll
you.
vote yes.
Okay,
So the motion is to place this on the warrant for town meeting.
God, keep me on the straight track, will you? Okay,
I don't know if I'm the right person tonight to do that, but we'll try. Between Peter and I.
go for it.
So we have a motion and it's seconded. What we're voting on is whether or not to place the bylaw amendment reducing the number of Conservation Commission members on the warrant.
Okay, all those in favor?
of putting it on the warrant, raise your hand. That would be 0. All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Okay.
The next one on the list was the Historic District Historical Commission. We've addressed that. Following is number 14, penalties.
All
And
right.
this is essentially making sure that non-criminal disposition applies to any bylaw violations that are not explicitly already referenced as having a non-criminal disposition process embedded in them. So there are a number of bylaws that say you shall or you shall not, but it doesn't then say what happens if they are found in violation. So what we're trying to do here, and this is something that came out in going through the codification process, this was probably the most pressing matter to address now as opposed to later in terms of a clarification that we think would help. And this is, by and large coming from staff.
Right.
In terms of something that we would be better served by having this clear in our bylaws now as opposed to waiting a year or whenever the codification process came forward.
Okay. I got it.
So this is saying that if a bylaw that's in our bylaws is not being followed, that some person
Penalty.
has the ability to impose a penalty on that person or entity.
And then it
Which
says
is-
if there isn't a fee structure somewhere else, that.
This is what it is.
That this is what it is, which is first violation, a warning, second violation, $50, third violation, $100, fourth and subsequent violations, $300, which is the maximum allowed by statute.
So, just a couple of questions. I understand what we're trying to do here, and it makes a lot of sense. But from a practical point of view, is there an appropriate person in town that has the expertise to determine whether all of these bylaws that could potentially be broken are being met or not. Did I ask that correctly? I mean, a zoning bylaw, pretty straightforward. You've got a code enforcement officer, he's familiar with our zoning.
You mean like an on-site judge?
No, I mean, like, the one that came to my mind actually was the Historic District Commission. So the Historic District Commission has met, and they've put some conditions on something, on someone's house. I don't know, the fence can be this high. Is that a reasonable example of something the Historic District, I don't want to make an obtuse example. And the person, but that's not in a bylaw. That's just a condition that's been placed by within their authority.
Yep.
So how does that play out? So who is then the enforcing person? It says, any town of Wenham public officer, it lists a lot of them. But in that kind of an instance where it's not clear, who's the enforcement officer? Who goes there and says, I know that there's been a judgment made and you're not following it because I have that.
Well,
So I think apps, because based on the current iteration of the historic district bylaw, I would suspect that the answer is that there isn't an ability to enforce those.
there isn't
Okay.
an ability
Correct.
to enforce it. It wouldn't,
Persuasion right now.
Yeah,
Right.
and that would continue to be the case.
So there's,
well,
doesn't,
what if, would there be any sense to having the building inspector in there?
That's what we had proposed under the original Historic District Commission bylaw, but the board wanted residents to have the ability to appeal those decisions at the local level as opposed to going to court. And so
Right.
absent that being an option, which it isn't, the local appeal option is going to the MAPC, which isn't local.
Oh,
The
So-
Historic District Commission withdrew that element of the proposed
so
bylaw.
it jumps that far?
well, so I guess I didn't make the connection at first. So the reason that the Historic District Commission doesn't want to have penalties is because, or enforcement of penalties and enforcement is because there's no local appeal? Is that correct?
Yes?
I think they don't want to put those fines in. They don't have teeth right now, but they didn't want to put the teeth in without a local appeal option.
They did not want to put it
They
in
did
without
not,
a
and
local
that was also
appeal.
based in part on the board's feedback when it was
Okay,
discussed.
but we didn't countermand something that they felt strongly about, and therefore they changed their,
Oh, I think they took your
Okay.
feedback. I think that that was consistent with where they were coming from as
Okay.
well. They were hoping to have some other remedy, and when there wasn't any, that was why they.
Okay.
okay.
Oh, I
Yeah,
see.
So,
it's-
I'm not trying to make enemies here, I'm just,
They're even a change in Mass General Law now.
yeah. So,
Let's not.
so then anything else, most of these things that would need to be enforced relate to a bylaw that's written and have someone that is responsible for enforcing them.
Correct.
Okay, I get it.
And realistically, we're talking about, this is few and far in between.
Yeah,
But when and if it happens, you want that authority to be clear,
right.
and so that's the intent.
And some of these, a violation, a second or a third violation could be the third time that someone did something, or the third day that they didn't stop doing something.
Depending
right.
on what the situation is, yes.
Okay. Okay, do you have, I'm ready to
No.
at least
Oh,
make a
yeah,
motion
that's
about
fine.
putting it on the warrant, and then we can,
Yeah, I just,
Discuss.
again,
ahead.
I just am very concerned that this could turn into a long conversation.
And
this is why we didn't do it last year, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure kicking it down the road again is
It's
necessarily.
explained right, it shouldn't.
Well, that's
Somebody who to explain.
fair point. Somebody who takes it apart and puts it into layman's terms.
And that would not be the moderator.
correct.
Just saying.
Crying
Just
out
saying.
loud.
That is true in general, right?
Yeah. Well, that was
We
what
all had
discussed.
that input, that's an unfair situation to have to moderate the meeting and understand every detail and explain everything of every article. That's fair. I don't know who the right person is, but I
Gee,
leave that
Trudy, are
to
you having a
you
guilt
and your,
complex here or something?
and your trusty team to come up with that.
Yep.
So assuming that we can explain this,
Yes. All right,
and
thank you.
call the motion, I guess, ourselves if we need to. I will make a motion to place the article entitled Bylaw Amendment Penalties on the warrant for town meeting. So this is placing it on the warrant.
Second?
Do we need to talk
Motion?
anymore?
No.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Since it's on the warrant, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on this bylaw amendment penalties. Is there a second?
I guess so. Yes.
Then we can discuss it. So, if you have a discussion point, then now's.
Well, I'm just a little bit confused by it still, a little bit concerned as to, is this something, is this manageable in reality? Or is it just a feel-good thing?
No, this isn't necessarily a feel-good thing.
Not for the
Okay.
people who are.
No, this is something that is, I think, will be occasionally operationally helpful when and if situations arise where we want to enforce a bylaw.
I'm going to go by your judgment, Peter, because you know this far better than I do. It's not something I've given much thought to begin with, but
So just to a couple of examples, because it might help clarify that maybe or may not be real life. If someone has cut down trees in the wetlands, and there's a bylaw that says you're not allowed to cut down trees in the wetlands, and someone, I guess this is the way this would always go, someone would see that and report it to someone here, probably town administrator's office, because they wouldn't know any other. The appropriate person who knows about this stuff would be able to go out there and say, yep, trees were cut down, the bylaw says they're not supposed to cut down, this is a wetland, you're in violation.
Correct, and I don't know that, I can't speak to the Wetlands Protection Act
They
off
have
the
their
top.
own fee schedule.
Off the top of my head, so wetlands, I think, is one that is already covered.
Okay, I picked the wrong example. Just wanted to pick a concrete example that
Yeah.
everyone could get through.
well, Kath,
How about cutting down trees on town land?
Yeah.
Cutting down trees on
There
town
we go.
land, that's a good one, which is
So-
clearly a town bylaw.
But, right, and we
But-
didn't necessarily
the
have the
town
ability to
owns land
enforce.
in a lot of places. Who is going to prove that somebody cut it down?
Well, this is.
Maliciously.
This is
It's
if it
a
was-
judgment.
And who you would go,
Well, and it's a judgment by the person who's doing the, if it's a
not-
code enforcement officer, it's that person's judgment.
this is, to me, it's starting, that's why I'm confused, because it's starting to look like a Law and Order type of story, where, okay, who shot him? Well, I don't know. Who was nearby? I don't know. Cameras? Anybody have cameras on this thing? I do.
It's, it's never, at least in my experience of observing it, it's never straightforward. It's never
I mean, a water
really black and
violation
white.
is measurable.
Although, on second thought, if people have seen people cutting down trees
Mhm.
next to their property that they know is public property, then it's that eyewitness's testimony.
Mm.
I do think to have bylaws and not be able to do anything to enforce them seems just on its face ridiculous. Is this absolutely right?
Yeah, I get your point.
I don't know, but it's at least moving in the right direction. And if we have to fine tune it or whatever over time, we'll at least know what doesn't work.
And this is a very standard provision that was recommended by town council that is in many, many town bylaws across the Commonwealth.
Right.
Not to say that that makes it
Okay.
right, but just saying that this is not unique or precedential in any way.
No, and I guess we spent some time with this last year, and it came down to, in last year's discussion, more an issue of not feeling comfortable explaining it than not feeling like it was a necessary thing to do. So,
Well, if you notice,
that's
that was my first concern.
well, right, and it's going to boy, there are going to be others that are going to be way harder to explain than this one, I think, who said this? The right person explaining it can make it fairly straightforward, and I would recommend whoever's explaining it, give a very simple example, and then it will become concrete for people. Do we have any further discussion on it? I think the motion on the floor right now is, we voted to put it on the warrant. Yes?
Yes.
And now
Yeah.
we have a motion to recommend favorable
So you're
action,
just waiting
which
for
is
it.
seconded, so we just need to vote.
That's fine, I'll go along with it.
So all in favor
Aye.
of recommending favorable action, raise your hand.
Aye.
2 yeses. Okay.
Okay.
What do you got next, Peter?
Next one is number 15, bylaw amendment, certain acts prohibited. This is to address pumping water on the roadways. I know the board talked about this at least once, if not twice. I think major questions coming out of that discussion were, how much of an issue is this?
Right.
And so included in the packets is some feedback from a number of department heads, DPW director, police chief, and so forth. Again, this is from the police's perspective, an ability of having no way to enforce this issue. It's just the power of persuasion right now. And generally speaking, this will follow up half dozen times or so.
No pun involved.
Intended. Half dozen times or so a year. I will say one of the situations that prompted this conversation a couple months ago now led to a pretty significant motor vehicle accident out on Grapevine Road about a month or so ago. Not to say that, you know, we need to be responsive to every issue that comes up along those lines, but it was something that was already on our radar. And then again, it was, and the accident was directly caused by this kind of situation that we were trying to address in the bylaw. That said, it was, you know, hierarchy of importance in terms of the bylaws that we're talking about, 5 out of 6.
And the question that I actually asked each time this has been brought up has not been answered, I'm afraid. And that is the question of, can we, as a town, provide an alternative for those people who have, by no fault of their own, issue with water in their homes and pumping it out or draining it out through some elaborate system, but nowhere to put it? So what's the...
Yeah, you don't want me pumping it into your yard.
Right. And yeah, so I have this water,
want me to
I have
pump
a
it out to
sump
the
pump, I
street.
have a drain system in my basement. The water is coming out of my house in a hose, I guess. If I just let it go into my property, it's going to drain back under my house. If I clearly am not going to put that in the storm drain, heaven forbid, because who knows what that is. And if I put it at the edge of my property, hoping that it will at least absorb that far away, depending on the lot size, it's either going to end up in the street or back on your property. So that was my question. I get it. If it flows out of the street and it's cold and it's a thin sheet of water, it'll turn into black ice and
97.
it could be dangerous.
It's been a problem.
But, so we're telling people what not to do, but I don't know what we do with folks who have no
Other means of
choice.
dealing with it.
Yeah, so there are plenty of conversations around this in cities around removal of snow from, right? You can't push snow into the public ways.
But that's a little different, because you have control. I mean, you know, it's your snow. Everyone's got
Oh, no.
enough.
God dropped it down.
Well, and if you
That's
can't,
enough what?
if you don't have room on your property to put your snow, then you have a responsibility to move it somewhere, and that exists, you know? Somebody hires, unfortunately, they hire a truck, and I don't know who does this, but I can imagine a situation, just like at a small lot, small driveway, no place to put the snow,
Right.
you pick up the
As a
snow and
commercial
you
property
cart it off. I think
manager,
we do that.
I've done that to the tune of 70 truckloads.
I guess I
big
just
trucks.
I don't know what you do in the situation of water that's collected in your house because the water table is this, or something has changed since you moved in, or whatever. Maybe that doesn't exist. I don't know.
Do people typically have water in their house in the winter? I would.
This time of
Well,
year is
yeah,
when you'll
that-
see it.
They could. I mean, this kind of a winter where it's cold and it snows and then it's warm.
There's 18 inches of frost in the ground now. So what happens is there's no place for the melting snow, and if we have a heavy rains, to go.
And so some of that is going to go
If
into
you
the
are in
street.
any, and you should talk.
That was,
We fixed the problem.
You know,
but
it's just, I just would love someone to answer the question. Are there any options? If there are no options.
Well, we haven't
and-
written any options into the bylaw, because I don't know what that would look like.
And has there been discussion about what they could look like?
Yeah, so I think our primary concern was, as currently written, or based on the three options that town council provided, whether there would be any concern about conflicts with the stormwater regulations, right? Because we
Right.
don't want to be putting something in place that would, be moving us in the wrong direction relative to stormwater enforcement. And the answer there was that as worded, none of these bylaws created an issue with that, but there was no further conversation or feedback.
I don't know. To me, I think this one is circular in motion. I just don't see where we're going to gain some ground here, and how big a problem it truly is, that I have to even question more so. You put some additional sand and salt on the roadway if it becomes icy.
Correct, but the issue there is you're sending out you're calling in two staff members for 4 hours minimum time to sand or salt one location,
Yep, got it.
which is what we've done on a number of occasions.
Including sidewalks.
Yeah, and town council did give us three options for wording, and I tried to put in the most moderate of the three, recognizing the feedback that the board gave, but.
I guess I don't feel that strongly about it. I just, again, I guess this is one of those bylaws that if passed, is enforced. Right? So the snow, even the snow has been around for a long time and an issue for a long time, and we have, I think already have a bylaw relative to
So
snow.
this is a modification of an existing bylaw, which already prohibits pushing snow and ice into the roadways or onto sidewalks.
Right.
It's just adding the water component to it. It is not a new bylaw.
Liquid water as
It
opposed to frozen
is a
water.
modification to the existing bylaw. But again, as we've talked about, we have 12 articles out of the gate,
Yeah.
and we've already added 3, so we're at 15 right now.
Okay. I'll make a motion and we'll vote. I move that the Board of Selectmen place our article number, is it still 15? Article entitled Bylaw Amendment, Certain Acts Prohibited, on the warrant for annual town meeting.
I'll second the motion.
I'm going to go with your judgment on this.
I'm not in favor of it. You know, the more I think about it, the more I see it as I've always had great disgust with legislation that happens because of a very one or few instances to get notoriety. And there really needs to be more creativity put towards how to resolve the issue if it's small. as opposed to, we created another law. The one that always got me, because I was in Boston at the hearing for it, it was this trench law. And the poor, nobody ever thought about the poor farmer out in Western Mass, or multiple farmers, who lose cattle. And he's got to go run to town to get a permit to bury this cow that passed away or died or got run over or whatever happened to it. You know, we legislate a little bit too much and too much without enough forethought. And is this going to really help the town better manage its operation, or is it going to cause some grief to, I don't know, 12 people, 24 people who have a water problem that now currently push it out and it goes down the street or down the drain, and
Or most of the time gets absorbed by their grass, and
Yeah.
occasionally
Yeah.
overflows because the ground is frozen and flows into the street. I don't, you know, it's not always in people's direct control. So, enough discussion?
Yes, ma'am.
All those in favor of placing this article on the warrant, say aye.
aye.
In favor of placing it on the warrant?
Oh. No.
Okay, because you weren't, that's not the way you were
I know,
talking, that's the only
reverse
reason I
the
questioned
The
you.
reverse conversation.
Okay, so in favor of placing this on the warrant? Okay. All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. We'll never get through them if we,
Well, this
Okay.
is what's bothering me.
Article 24 is the last general bylaw and the lowest priority. We've talked about this, adding a new associate planning board member. It was on the list of warrant articles last year. It didn't make the cut. Again, the important thing here is that it's not a standing associate member of the planning board that would be appointed. It is only when they're acting as a special permit granting authority. So it is not for any and all projects that come before the planning board. It is just for that purpose, is the only time that you can have an associate planning board member. So they're,
And then why would it be a benefit?
well, the idea generally is what we talked about earlier with the Conservation Commission. You have somebody who has expressed interest in serving on the planning board, which is an elected position, so it's a little different. They would be there to help with quorum issues.
Oh, so they'd attend all these meetings,
They
but
would
not really
attend.
have an official vote,
unless it was a,
unless it was
Unless it was a special permit
project.
granting authority, and that would only be if they needed the associate member in that
Okay.
case. So it is a much narrower associate member than, say, the ZBA.
Sure.
it's an appointed person.
It can, yes, it would be an appointed person, and we have discretion in how we would structure the warrant article for what that appointment would look like. I think when we talked about it the first time, or two or three,
Right.
there was interest that it would be appointed in some form of fashion, either by the Board of Selectmen or by the Board of Selectmen and Planning
And planning
Committee.
board together,
Planning
yeah.
Board.
And how many members are there now? So, 5.
So,
Yeah,
in my,
absolutely.
yeah, in my general philosophy of life, having people who are interested, or having more people to a limit,
Yeah,
is never a problem.
yeah. If they're
And
sitting in
although
the
this has
wings,
a
you're
little
right.
wrinkle, I think it's reasonably explainable. So, this one's pretty simple.
Yep.
I can't imagine any unintended consequences. Maybe there are,
No,
but this one is,
no, it's got,
I don't know if
it's
it's a
got
high
controls on
priority,
it.
but it's here, and someone thought it had some priority, so.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
It-
it was the lowest priority of the general.
It was the
bylaws, but-
low, so for
but
me,
that's-
so just to explain, so for me, it's a priority, you know, it needs, if it's come forward as a priority, if it meets the general philosophy, my general philosophy is of more public engagement rather than less in any of these, and if it's something it needs enforcement and can be enforced, and then if it's something on this particular town meeting that's going to take 20 minutes, I'm pretty sure there are other more important things. So
Okay.
that's what I'm,
Go for it.
but I don't have strong, we want to wait on this one?
No,
We certainly can.
nope, that's fine.
So
Please.
I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen place what I think is called Article 24, bylaw amendment, new associate planning board member on the warrant.
Second?
All in, more discussion?
No.
And the one caveat I would just have on that is that we need the final language from town council relative to what that appointment process would look like.
Consists
So it
of,
would be,
yeah.
that would be something we'd have to circle back on tomorrow night. So
Okay.
I'd recommend putting it on the warrant and then a recommendation tomorrow night once you've seen the full language.
Okay, and that's a reasonable request to
Yep.
have that language for tomorrow night. Okay, so what we're doing is voting now to place it on the warrant.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And to Peter's point, we will wait until tomorrow to make a recommendation based on the language that we get back from council. Okay, so those general bylaws, those were all the general bylaws.
General bylaws, done. Now we're on to the fun ones, zoning
Yeah.
bylaws. So the first one, in terms of priority, on the zoning bylaws is number 21, site plan review applicability. And I think really the most important element of this, is that we had originally been talking about a new, stormwater, management bylaw
Yep.
in order to comply
Federal
with
regs.
the federal regs.
Yeah.
And we are now, at least for this coming year, planning on incorporating stormwater regulations into the planning board's rules and regulations. So we need a reference to that fact in our zoning bylaws in order to avoid any potential concerns around being compliant. And so that's, there is another additional wording change at the start of the site plan review applicability bylaw amendment that seeks to clarify an issue that has come up as trying to navigate exactly how to interpret for a couple different projects. So that change is in there, and then it's just pointing to the planning board's rules and regulations relative to stormwater management.
So this is strictly stormwater management. It's mostly all verbiage coming from the requirements by the federal.
Yeah, it's really just,
allowing us to
it's putting in a reference
Yeah.
Right.
in our bylaw pointing to the planning board rules and regs so that they can
So it goes in the bylaw, and here you go, over here is where you can find the details.
correct without developing this really extensive multi-page.
Let's not discuss it anymore, let's do
stormwater
it.
bylaws.
Yeah, that seems like in the category of,
There's nothing
Well,
to discuss because
of compliance and,
there's nothing we can do about it.
right.
We don't make the
Okay.
rules.
So I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen place the article zoning bylaw amendment site plan review applicability on the warrant.
Second?
Further discussion? Not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. On the warrant. So secondly, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on said article. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Is there any discussion?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, favorable
Board of
action.
recommendations, huh?
Yeah, that's what I feel like tonight, the Board of Recommendations or non-recommendations. Okay, so on the warrant and favorable action for that one.
This is an easy one.
Yeah, you're gonna be surprised at what I have to say about this one.
All right, where are we?
So,
So now we're at Article 23, zoning bylaw amendment, signs.
Gee, mini crow. We
So,
have to have a zoning bylaw amendment to it.
so we
Why can't
have,
we
a-
just-
we have a zoning bylaw now for signs. It has been often discussed.
Yep.
And I think, as Jackie has mentioned on at least one occasion, operationally, there's definitely a need to address the issue. We get a fair amount of
Complaints?
calls, emails, communications relative still to sign enforcement, zoning bylaw enforcement.
So these are
around
complaints
signs.
against somebody putting out signs where they shouldn't be?
Yep, and there are, then there's the, where should they be, where shouldn't they be?
How long should they stay up?
Where should they stay up, et cetera. We did, in addition to the changes that were made around clarifying the difference between real estate signs, contractor signs, non-commercial signs. There was also language that was added around non-municipal signs on public property, which points to a policy
To be determined.
to be determined of the Board of Selectmen, which requires a public hearing. And so that was, those are the major changes that were made as part of this process.
This is shockingly clear. To me, maybe because I've lived it for a long time. Well, when someone first said, we're gonna have a sign bylaw, I thought, oh, no way. I'm not sure people will like this bylaw. Particularly since it does not really address what we get a lot of I get a lot of comments about, signs on public property. It also is in just one instance unclear about what a public, where is it? Under general standards for signs.
Yep.
It's number E says no sign or sign structure shall interfere in any way with a public way, including sidewalks. This has been my concern since we started talking about this, and it was my concern with the planning board meeting. There's a lot of confusion about what a public way is. So when we make that a general statement, I think we add a level of complexity in enforcing it unless we can clearly define what a public way is. And specifically, the discussion that we have had many times is, I used to have lawn that went all the way to the street. A couple of years ago, they put in a sidewalk. Now I have lawn, sidewalk, lawn. Is that lawn on the other side of the sidewalk a public way, or is it mine, or is it?
So I think that's where public property comes into play, but not public way. I think town council would say that public way can be clearly defined. We can certainly
And what is that?
check to confirm. It's the actual roadway. It's not.
That's what I would
it's not the laying
suspect.
out of
So it's the roadway and the sidewalk.
yeah.
Oh, the roadway and the
We can
sidewalk.
certainly.
That-
Well, it says including sidewalks.
Well, it does, yeah.
In
It does say, that's why it's a little confusing. Any with a public way, including sidewalks, which led me to think, well, what, other than, seemed obvious, the road,
What happens
are
to
there
that
other
grass in the middle? you
public
say?
ways? But I was at the planning board meeting where they were talking about, they kind of got stuck on the non-municipal sign located on public property when they included sidewalks, roadsides, and roadways. We all, including myself, got stuck on that, but then they switched that to just saying, with the exception of a location to be determined by the Board of Selectmen after a hearing, which doesn't really get it off our plate at all.
But it gives you discretion.
But it gives us discretion to at least have one, which apparently,
Yep.
there was a point where I thought that council was opining that we could not limit or put signs in a particular area and limit the type and number and all of that, but
Absolutely can. Type, there are going to be restrictions on the type, but size, number, location, duration, you can be prescriptive about that in your policy.
so if someone wanted and followed the process, whatever we came up with, to put a political sign on public property, we would have to consider that in the same way that we would consider any other sign, if it's the appropriate size and all those things. That's gonna be the tricky part when we
Yeah.
go around having
yeah.
But that's,
I knew you were going to say that.
yeah, well,
All right, figured
it's
it
a
out.
freedom, I know there's a freedom of speech issue, and I know that our planning board chairperson appropriately is, and council, very concerned about that as it pertains to signs, and controlling them. What does this mean for signs that are presently in place, that if this bylaw were passed, what does it mean for them if they're,
So zoning bylaw goes into effect
The day of the town
the
meeting.
day of the town meeting vote, yeah, yeah, yeah.
so,
But I think Catherine's asking if somebody's
Yeah.
got a sign on their house advertising their business and it's not within these regulations.
yeah, then do they take it down? Do they get grandfathered in?
There's nothing new in here that deals with permanent signs.
So
This is just
if,
around temporary signs, so this is just non-commercial contractor and real estate signs.
but there is,
Oh, these are
Well-
temporary signs.
Well, you've got number B, permanent signs.
Correct, but that is not new and different.
Oh,
That language is the same as the existing bylaw. So that's,
So these are short-term signs? Okay.
so in the business district, if someone were to put up a sandwich board on the sidewalk, that is not permissible under this, but it's never been permissible?
correct.
So,
I think they might, if this is replacing the current, is there any way to print the current so people can compare?
Yeah.
or at least highlight the things that are different.
And normally we
It's,
do that,
There's only
yeah.
one section that's not bolded different.
Yeah.
It's just that section
It's just that one section,
under temporary signs that was changed.
correct.
Everything else is as currently living now.
so we've,
Yeah,
So-
7.2 A through C,
7.2
A through B,
Yeah, A and B.
A and B,
But they've been edited, they're not new, they've been edited.
correct.
And then the addition of the bolded language in I, under section.
7.3,
okay.
Everything else is as current.
yes.
Individual businesses within the complex identified at street side with signs 12 inches by 36 inches arranged vertically in a single structure? I'm sorry.
Sorry.
You mean you couldn't find that? Jeez, come on. Just because I had a note on it. This is in the business district. I didn't remember that, and I didn't look back, that under
is not new.
7.2.2B is new, or not,
That's not new.
not new.
I don't know, I'm not too thrilled with this one, the more I think about it. There's gonna be a lot of,
I think,
If I may too, with the business district, it's also the same as the historic district. So,
well, is that true? Is the Iron Rail considered a business district?
No.
Okay, so it's just, oh, I remember this now. It's just here and up further on 1A.
Correct.
It's coming, all coming back to me.
oh yeah, that's right.
It's kind of recessed, was very recessed in my mind for a variety of reasons. I understand the issue, and I know personally, all you have to do is walk downstairs and see how many signs have been removed and are now in Town Hall waiting for their owners to pick them up, to see that this is not a 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 time issue.
Really?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think in its early days of see-click
And the
fix.
types are what?
Temporary
Say a contractor
signs.
doing a roofing job or something, or a painter, or,
Yeah, not frequently on that, more special events or open houses for private schools.
the Shore Country Day signs.
or even like the youth sports organizations that
Right.
are not a part of our rec
Yes,
department.
and that's
that are
why we
considered-
really need a place for these
Which is
things
what
to
we-
happen.
Which is what this allows us to have.
Which allows the board to actually do that now, which you don't have the ability to do without passing this bylaw.
So right now, there is, unless this is on your personal property, Those signs are,
Okay.
temporary signs are not allowable
You said they can't be anywhere.
anywhere. And-
Or they have to only, be such a size and be there for so.
And what's the ruling on political signs, meaning whether it's state or town or federal?
So there are, so this does not, so that would be considered a non-commercial sign. So there is no time restriction or number restriction. It is just that they can't be greater than a certain size
Or obstructing a,
or obstructing a
Public
public way.
way.
They can't be any more than 7 square feet.
So Baker for governor is fine, or whoever.
I think, within a certain amount of time after the event. In this case, I guess the event would be an election, right? Don't we specify that you can leave it up for a certain amount of time?
Those are only
Only,
for special event signs.
okay,
Political signs
so
are
an
not
election,
special event signs.
election is not really considered a category of special event.
Correct.
So there's nothing in here that would preclude anyone from putting a 7 by whatever sign on their lawn promoting something political and leaving it there permanently,
3 by 2.5.
3 by 2.5. But there's nothing that says they can,
Can't.
which goes to the freedom of speech.
Okay.
It's their property, they can say whatever they want, hang whatever they want off their house, make any statement they want, because that's the country we
Okay.
live in.
Let the voters
Like I said,
decide.
I was fully prepared to
Speaking
say.
of signs,
this
have you
is-
seen the one out at Iron Rail yet?
Yes, the one at Iron Rail is lovely,
It's quite attractive.
quite
Yeah, good
an
job.
improvement over what we have, and thankfully would fit into this bylaw, fits into this bylaw.
Well, they had to go for a special permit from the planning board. for this.
Well, it is larger than
Yes,
probably, yeah. And this, I do believe, allows that to happen.
yes, still does.
Right. Okay,
Yeah, we need to.
you know,
keep moving
we're
along.
gonna be crucified if we leave this room without doing one
Well, we're gonna
thing,
go
one other
back,
thing.
maybe we should go back to that at this point.
Well, I don't know, we're getting close. So anyway.
Signs.
Yeah, so signs. So we're going to make, I am going to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen place the article entitled,
23,
well, it's number 23 here, zoning bylaw amendment signs on the warrant. Is there a second for placing it
Yes,
on the
second.
warrant? Do we need any further discussion?
no.
The second motion will be that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the article zoning bylaw amendment signs. Is there a second on the favorable action motion?
Yes, C, yes. Aye.
So it's made and motion,
One of
moved
those
and
words.
seconded. All those in favor of favorable action on the bylaw amendment signs, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Not opposed, so unanimous. Okay. This list is getting shorter, and it's not bad.
All too painfully slow, though, but
Well, but at least we're getting through some of it.
I know.
So the next I had listed actually as the kennel definition and adding it to the use regulation table, 16, 17. That's actually, after some additional feedback from staff, a little lower on the list. So
Okay.
I'm gonna move to number 22, small, medium solar installations.
So I'm just going to jump to a question on this one, because it's a
Where is
kind of a little bit of a deal breaker. So this is the one that talks about only small and medium solar installations.
Correct. Because we are already regulated for larger.
Okay. And
Oh.
allows for a site plan review for, well, let me go back here. Under medium solar installations, it says that the medium-sized ground-mounted solar energy systems shall be permitted anywhere in a side or rear yard if they, and it lists setbacks. And then later on, it says, 2 pages later, I think, it said, under 10.3.4, medium-scale ground-mounted solar energy systems proposed shall undergo site plan review. That just may be that I'm not in on a planning board, but if it says shall be permitted, and it gives it sounded to me
And it's
like
relatively
it's
small.
permitted by right. Because it's the same language that they use for small-scale ground-mounted solar energy systems, shall be permitted with setbacks, but no provision for site plan review for small scale. Am I misunderstanding that? And I should note that a medium-scale ground-mounted
We were
solar.
just trying to make the bylaws for small and medium symmetrical, so it could very easily be done that 10.3.4. You usually
Or-
want to have the standards or the setbacks before you talk about like the contents of the plan and the site plan document, but it might just be that it's the ordering that's confusing here.
What's confusing to me is that both of these have the same language at the beginning, but one requires a site plan review and one does not.
Right, so in 10.3.3, in addition to saying they meet the setbacks, it should also say, no, it wouldn't.
Shouldn't it say,
wouldn't point to site plan review there, no.
well, why,
You'd just be switching .3 and .4.
is there any circumstance under which I could get a medium-scale ground-mounted solar photovoltaic installation without a site plan review? Medium size? No. So why wouldn't it just say, shall be permitted with site plan review or something like that? And, because it's not till 2 pages later where it says site plan review provisions shall undergo site plan review in accordance with section 13.5. Because it's just, the distinction right up front is not clear to me. I read it and said, oh, shall be permitted anywhere, and then 2 pages later it said, but you have to have a site plan review. So it's not really shall be permitted anywhere, may be permitted anywhere with a site plan, with approval of the planning board, or, I don't know how that's what I mean to.
Didn't you just say shall be with site plan review?
Well, I don't think that's the right way to say it.
Well,
If I were,
Change the word.
I don't know what the right word is. I guess I'm just asking that there be some distinction right up front, that a small one can be done by right, and a medium-sized one, which, by the way, can be up to an acre in size, requires site plan review.
Well, the
that
acre
which would
one
include-
I can understand.
Well, anything above small
Yeah.
and less than large. So, doesn't the site plan review have to take those setbacks into account?
Yeah, I think you could just do, at the end of 10.3.3, the bullets, you would say, semicolon, subject to site plan review under, and point to it.
I'm a little sensitive to clarity around the need for site plan reviews. I guess that's where this
Yep.
concern is coming from. And the only other question I have on that is, can we confidently say that these are the most restrictive policies that we're allowed to have legally?
I don't know that we checked with legal counsel if they could be more restrictive.
Why do you ask the question?
Well, because I'm not, I can only imagine a situation where someone wants to put up a 40,000 square foot surface area, ground-mounted photovoltaic installation.
We're talking almost an acre.
Yeah, and unless we are, I don't think our citizens, I think our citizens want us to be very strict in allowing that to happen. The flip side of that is, we need to have some, anything is better than nothing, and I think we have nothing right now, so people can
Yeah.
just pretty much do anything.
And I think that's the one thing, just to kind of back up, right? So this isn't stemming from a particular issue or project.
Okay.
This is more trying to be proactive and get out ahead of the fact that solar is coming more and more everywhere you look. And so in order to avoid a situation where we have no
controls,
ability
no
to regulate
regulation, yeah.
what that would look like in a residential neighborhood, that we would have, something that was reasonable, but also restrictive and, trying to put some good process in place to avoid unintended consequences that we've talked about.
So I think that if this is on the borderline of, oh my gosh, we're going to eat up the whole town meeting on this one, which I'm sorry to make a consideration, but it is, at least particularly in this town meeting. If we think that we can, I guess that's all of us, the moderator to a certain degree, can contain the conversation to, we have nothing, to what you just said, and not get into the real weeds, it seems like a reasonable thing to do. I don't know about if we can stay out of the weeds.
Yeah, I don't know how realistic that is. I just don't.
I don't either.
Can I add a clarifying point that might be helpful in terms of people understanding this bylaw, is that in regards to the mechanism, we can't do a stricter mechanism than what's outlined in this draft bylaw. We can't do, for example, special permits for solar. That's prohibited. So in terms of the mechanism of what's in this bylaw, where we have to have some things by right and then some things by site plan review applicability, we are complying with the green, to keep our green community status, while also still trying to be restrictive in terms of the characters of the neighborhood. So I will say that that's a clarity, is that the mechanism can't be stricter than what's proposed.
May I ask the moderator, who happens to be here, a question?
You want to ask me?
May I ask you a question?
On solar projects.
Not on particular, but again, you understand where we're coming from relative to trying to balance everything and put things in here that are important, but from what you have heard, do you think this is one that we'll get into the weeds on? Or do you think it's one that we can explain away quickly? I mean, it's impossible to predict.
It's all how it's explained. If you,
For sure.
can get it out right there in the beginning, there could be limited discussion on it.
And the wild card is always, is there a strong advocate? I won't use the word zealot. That might be an overkill, but some very powerful advocate that just wants to get the point across and make sure he or she could get the vote.
Yeah, and I don't know that's necessarily the case on this particular issue.
So it's not how it's come forward.
Because it's not like something we're,
Responding to
we're
a
trying
pile
to get ahead of
of
something.
requirements or requests, right?
So this one's new, is that correct?
This entire bylaw is new.
This is a new
yes.
bylaw.
It's a new bylaw.
Are we looking at a special in the fall?
I think a lot of that is going to come
Before-
out of going to be discussed after we figure out what's happening here.
Yep. It would be specifically just for zoning issues.
I think if we have enough that we feel is important to address that can't wait until next year, but is going to make this meeting unwieldy, we would consider a special town meeting. But I guess my hope is that whatever we don't do this year can wait until next spring's town meeting.
And I would say that I think
Based on that.
all of these next 5 zoning bylaws fit within that category.
Of being,
Of
being
not
able to-
urgent,
Right,
but certainly top of the list in looking through issues that are out there. There's a potential liabilities, concerns, something we might bump into, and not necessarily have the appropriate language to address.
Okay.
if we, have you been counting?
Yeah,
Assuming we have,
so there's 12 that are on there, including up to CPC.
yeah,
So you're now up to 18, call it 19 with the election.
Total,
Total, yep.
19. That's probably manageable.
I think that's what we had the first year that I was moderator, was like 17 or 19. Last year was what, in
Yeah.
the 20s?
36,
What?
33.
33.
that's why it seems so
Somewhere
long.
in the high
Yeah, so-
So I
arenas.
think this way, there's two zoning bylaw amendments that are pretty clear about what they're trying to do and what the need is. There, you know, I'd say, the parking storage of commercial and recreational vehicles and the kennel definitions are both more, reactions to issues that have come up that we want some clarification on. So that's maybe kind of the next tier down, that's not being proactive, it's more reacting to. And then the last two, the lot and special permit definitions and use variances, I think, do not need to be addressed this year. I don't think there's really a pressing need to
Right.
get into those.
And I would have, if we got to number 5, parking storage of commercial recreational vehicles, I would have said we need a lot more discussion about
And do we?
unintended
do we even need
consequences
it?
before we would put, that I would have, so, but you're suggesting that we should have the site plan review applicability and this, and the signs, which we already have.
Yeah, I mean, those were the top two for
Yeah,
a reason. I
okay.
think we felt strongly on.
And if we do this one, it's the 19 and there's no further, no more.
But
Well,
we
no,
don't
so-
even have to do this one, I don't think, or
Well,
are
I'm
you
just-
recommending this
we
falls in the
did.
category?
I do think that there's some chance that you're gonna go down the rabbit hole.
With,
Oh, on this
with
one?
With the
with
solar.
solar?
Really?
Okay,
Very technical.
It's
Well, you
very,
know
it's
what?
very technical, and there are people
Right.
who feel strongly
right, on both sides.
about,
I'm not sure why you would consider it technical. These are plug-in systems today, and somebody else does all the figuring.
no, but if you, it's not a
It's a
couple paragraph bylaw.
Right,
It's
Yeah.
a 4-page bylaw.
Technical on how the process
Land,
goes.
it's land use technical rather than technology
Thank you,
Right,
okay.
right.
Okay, thank you.
And I
That
do
makes
really-
sense, Jackie.
When I think about our town meetings, if this is a group that's going to be inclined to have conversation, it's fairly polarizing. I mean, there's not too many people that think, oh, I don't care if someone sticks. I'm just reacting to some situations that have happened in other towns. And if people are aware of that, we'll go down the rat hole. So it would be my recommendation to follow Peter's recommendation,
Fine
that
with
we
me.
stick with everything that we've, with the exception
Covered.
of going back to CPC, everything else that we've put on the warrant, and we call it a warrant book, unless we have an epiphany between, now and tomorrow night. But, that being said,
Okay, Madam Chair, where are we going from here?
we need to talk about the CPC
you.
article.
What would you like to
Because
say?
I kind of like to make it home.
What would you like to say?
Oh, you probably don't really know what I would like to say, but
I asked, so
if I may,
I'm ready for the lioness.
well, just to recap a little bit. That's okay. Oh, thank you. Oh, that's okay, I'm good, thank you. Otherwise, I'm going to have to have a recess. But it does seem dry tonight, I don't know. So.
It's all the hot air in
It's
here.
it's the heat. It was, I felt like Jack. I thought it was warm when we first came in, and now it's feeling cold. Is it? Oh, really? Still toasty back there? Good. So, I don't even know how to recap. Just procedurally, Now, let me see. So the 2 pages that we have, that you gave us tonight, replace, well, really, the only one that changed is number 3.
Number
We
3,
haven't
correct.
taken we haven't put them, anything on the warrant, so the only wording that's changed is number 3.
Correct.
Okay, so let me remind us, or myself, actually, what we have done with the CPC appropriations.
Please.
We have placed on the warrant the first, what we call this, section of the CPA appropriations, which has to do with the transfer of community preservation funds to the reserve accounts, which actually is based on if I remember this correctly, or an underestimate of revenues from last year. So we got more state match than we thought. This is what, number 1 just says, this is how much we got, and this is what we have to do with it. It's not too much. And so that is on the warrant, and both Board of Selectmen and Finance and Advisory Committee have recommended favorable action.
Yes.
Okay. So we put number 2
On the warrant.
on the warrant, but
make-
didn't take action.
Correct.
Number 3
Didn't recommend.
didn't
And
recommend
number 2
action.
is,
Number 2 is transferring from the CPC fund revenue totals and allocating them to particular accounts.
oh, okay. All right.
I should have brought my book from last week, because I had some notes. So, putting that aside for the moment, we really can't do, we've talked about the fact that there could possibly be some reorganizing, but we have also put on the warrant number 4, all of the, number 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8,
Correct.
with some amended language in 6.
Correct.
So let's, I know I'm leaving the elephant in the room to last, but in the interest of moving things along, number 6 was the Community Preservation Fund grant for the community house. And we understood it, and I think that we were generally in support of it, but at the time, it was noted that Hamilton had a sister application, more money,
Yes, right.
et cetera, but they had some language in their application that made it contingent on a date, and we asked for staff to look at this and to see how ours could be made similar. So I have, this
Well,
says,
ours was earmarked for a
Heating.
specific piece of the project.
Right.
A boiler, I think it was.
yep. So did we, I'm reading this again.
Or at least that was the CPC's recommendation.
So
We didn't make the language changes. We did get the language from Hamilton, which is that the project has to commence by July
Oh,
1
yeah.
of 2020.
okay, so that was my,
So we had sent that to town council and didn't hear back from them today yet
Did-
on that, but that's essentially what's gonna be added as a,
Did Hamilton say why they did that? Is that just so that there isn't straggler money sitting out there for 2 years?
my
After 2 years?
best guess is that this request was couched in the context of a larger fundraising campaign at the community house and a
But
much
they are
bigger
doing a
capital
much
project that they're doing.
larger, yeah.
And so they didn't want the money to be tied up waiting for them to
Get to their-
meet their mark, if that was gonna take a number of years. So they wanted them to, if they were gonna, accept those funds, to at least move forward
Has
within a year.
Has there been conversation with the community houses to these request.
What request?
The request of itemizing or individually identifying the money to a part of the project and the dating that you're just describing.
I assume that they're aware of what that the money has been set aside for the heating project, but I can't say that for sure.
I have received a thank you email from Melissa Elmer of the Community House,
Oh, yeah.
so they are aware.
So they're aware,
Yes.
apparently they're okay with it, or?
I believe they had a representative at the night of the meeting where this money was recommended by the CPC.
Yes, they did. I sat next to her.
We didn't have anything from that evening, but I have had subsequent communications from Melissa Elmer,
Yep.
so.
Okay, so, and it was, okay?
Thank you.
It was good, thank you. Okay, if it's a thank you, that's what
So,
I'm looking for.
Yes, it was understanding that it's a recommendation, town
Yep.
meeting needs to vote, and thank you.
Yep, okay.
so there's two ways that we can do this. We can recommend favorable or not action contingent upon the final wording, or if you're comfortable that it's just going to say commence July 1st, 2020, and you won't know anything different by
Yeah,
tomorrow,
I think that's,
we can wait and just do,
I think that we've got a couple left to circle back to
Okay,
for tomorrow.
so we'll
I
circle
think-
back
I think
now
we'll
or
just
tomorrow.
Circle back so that way.
okay.
Is there a reason why we can't?
Well, because we're waiting for final wording, and we haven't heard from council on that contingency, and it sounds like we're close to hearing, and it's a simple thing.
It's just because we have a couple.
I guess.
There's just a little housekeeping, couple of
Yeah,
housekeeping.
that's okay.
That's all.
All right.
So there are two things left, then. It's number 3, which is the, of course, Harbor Light project.
Yeah.
And then the potential ordering of the questions, which is within CPC.
Well, you didn't make recommendations on any of the other warrant article, any of the other projects under CPC yet.
So let's do them, quick.
They're
Okay.
just on the warrant.
They're pretty much no-brainers as far as I'm concerned, all of them.
Well, here, I need to think for a second, because my concern with some of the others was not their, whether I recommended favorable action on. No, I guess I'm okay. All right, so we can recommend action on, what are we missing? Well,
Everything but 1. And 3 isn't on there yet.
yeah. So I tried to ask this last time, and I don't think I was very clear. If we substantively were to change the number, recommend a different number
For what?
in number 3 for community housing. If this board tonight decided, no, not 750, I don't know, another number that we are willing to put,
950?
maybe 250. Any number that we change there is going to impact number 2.
No.
What's 2?
No, it would impact that motion for the particular amount and source of funds. But
So,
the 2 is basically,
so not 2.
like Jackie explained, it's the FY '20 estimated revenues. So it's not an expense, and so that motion does not have any impact on the subsequent motions on all the project requests.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm ready.
okay. So we are going to, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the CPC appropriations article number 2,
Which is?
which is moving that the town vote to transfer from the Community Preservation Fund estimated annual revenue for the purposes of reserving a minimum, et cetera, et cetera. It's am I right to say it's the distribution of the revenue?
Correct.
That we've already, or that
So
we
it's
expect to
It's
receive.
supporting their effort to move the money.
Well, it's apparently not connected at all to anything else that's in this.
Well, I mean, just to be clear, the board could, or the CPC could have recommended a higher amount be allocated to one of the 3 reserve funds, right? More could go to the Historic Resources Reserve Fund and then would not be available for projects that wouldn't, to be allocated for projects that wouldn't fall within that category.
Right.
The numbers that are represented here represent the 10%
The
minimum amount
39,830s.
under the statute, the 39,000
Right.
and change for those 3 reserve fund
Right.
allocations.
Okay. So that's the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion?
No.
If not, all in favor of recommending favorable action on number 2, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Okay. We did not take action on the others. Again,
Nope.
number 4?
Nope.
Okay. I think I know why, but whatever. So the easier, apparently less contentious ones. Number 4 is approving to recommendation of town meeting a grant of $126,100 for the borrowing for the rehab of historic town hall. I will make a motion that the board recommend favorable action on number 4.
Second that motion?
Any discussion?
Nope.
If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Number 5 is the grant, the recommendation of funding of a grant for Habitat for Humanity. These are all on the warrant, so this motion before us tonight will be to recommend that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the grant number 5, $60,000 to Habitat for Humanity. Is there a second?
No, I disagree with this. I did
Okay,
from
I
the
will second
beginning.
it, so that we can at least have a discussion. So it's on the warrant,
Yep.
and you do not, you,
Second your own motion?
did, well, someone else needs to make the motion then, because otherwise it's dead. We can't even make it. So if you're willing to, we need a motion to,
Then I'll second it for discussion.
right, thank you. That at least allows us to go through the whole process and allows you to vote however you want. So we have a motion and a second to recommend favorable action. Discussion.
Discussion is that we have given this operation a lot of money already, many times over the 60,000. Why we are giving them more makes no sense to me when we have other things that need to be addressed either now or down the road. I mean,
And I guess that I will say, coming as your representative to the Affordable Housing Trust, that this project, the Habitat for Humanity project, is in direct confluence, if that's a word, with the Affordable Housing Trust Action Plan that was put forward and approved by both the Board of Selectmen and the Affordable Housing Trust. If somewhere in this pile of paper, I could literally read to you an action item that was recommended.
I heard you I think it was the last meeting.
So that's my rationale anyway. This is what the community, this is what the community
I mean, I
wants
don't
us to do.
disagree with the project. We've given them enormous money, over $250,000. To give them another 60,000, I mean, we ask everybody else to contribute or raise funds and so forth. Where are their funds coming from? What are they telling us
Well,
that they've gotten money from?
So,
And for 2 units, yes, it contributes to the affordable housing stock, but in a very small way compared to the other project that we'll be on to, I assume, in a few minutes. Or maybe there's another one behind that somewhere, and this money should be held in bay for another opportunity.
You know, I don't think we're going to persuade each other on this particular one.
Probably not. Yeah.
I will say that the only equity that's being used for Harbor Light is our town money. This is asking for, the $230,000 was to acquire the land, which is very consistent with the request from Harbor Light. Yes, a different number of units. The 60,000 is not for the 230,000 was for acquiring the land. The 60,000 is to add to the money that they need to construct. I think we actually have his application in here.
Yeah.
We could probably look it up and find out exactly what his other sources of sources of funds are.
I mean, I've
but they run
personally
a very
worked on projects for that operation
right
locally.
So I think it's something we can afford. There's certainly money in the community preservation. It's completely consistent with the plan that the Affordable Housing Trust has put together. It's the plan for the Affordable Housing Trust is to get us to the 10% and then beyond. The trust never really discussed the 60,000 because we knew that was in his mind, but he didn't come to us and say that he was going to the CPA for construction funds. That being said, it's a poster child for affordable housing. It's in this community.
I guess maybe I'm missing something. Please just enlighten me.
No, like I said, we could take the time and we could look and see
like I said,
what
I've
other
worked
funds.
on 2 of these projects personally.
Yeah, so they're a completely different model than a 45-unit comprehensive permit.
Of course they are. I don't disagree with
rental.
that. They still fit into the criteria.
And they fit into the criteria, and the CPC has recommended it, and it's totally our discretion about whether we want to recommend favorable action or not. As individuals, as a
Do
board.
they have sufficient funds currently to complete the project?
Yes, I believe they do.
Then why
They
would we
have-
throw more
Well,
money
with
into it?
this, let me rephrase that. They have a pro forma
Yeah.
that includes, for construction, $30,000. Just as for Harbor Light, if Harbor Light doesn't receive this money, we have no guarantee that they're going to build it or not. It's in their pro forma that they need this money in order to be able to buy the property to build it. The same is true of Habitat. They have represented to the town in both of these instances that this money will help them build the project. Neither have said they must have this money to build the project. We don't know that for either of these.
That's just simply a request to help along the way, I guess.
Just to speak to the board's questions about the pro forma, total project cost is $488,000, and this is according to.
This is for the
40 Hill Street project, Habitat
Yes.
for Humanity.
Yeah.
This is in their CPA application. This is their development budget that they've included in that CPA application. Total project cost is just under $500,000, so $488,000. $230,000 is for acquisition. And the balance of $450,000 or thereabouts is for construction. Of that, they have here $42,000 from Habitat itself, $10,000 grant from Wells Fargo, a $56,000 loan from the federal home housing program. $10,000 grant from People's United, and a $80,000 contribution as a grant in home funds. So the Habitat match is $42,000, and the one thing I will say that is a little different on Habitat projects is that there's no development fee.
Okay.
So I guess it's an interesting point if we're going to counterpoint these two and put one as a higher priority over the other. The Hull Street project, Habitat, as part of its model, contributes towards its own money, towards the project. I did not see that in the Maple Woods project. I don't think that
I don't know. You
HCP
could be
well, we
right.
could look
I
at the
don't
pro
know.
forma again, but I believe that they are counting completely on our capital and state and federal grants and funds, and are not participating. That's neither here nor there, but this, you've just heard.
The other thing I will say is that both projects are counting on home funds, those federal pass-through funds, both as loans and as grants. Obviously, totally different scale. This is in the tens of thousands of dollars. Harborland's going to be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars,
Correct.
close to million plus actually total in terms of their funding requests from home. Two things on that front. One, you have two Wenham projects that are going to be competing for the same dollars that are getting smaller by the year. And two is that ultimately there is going to be a real part of what the consortium will look at in evaluating these projects and deciding whether to award funds is determining the extent of local support for them. So it's going to matter in their evaluation of whether they're going to give them those home funds, whether the town supported them with local matching funds.
I see that.
Just globally, but for both projects.
Right.
That's
Yeah,
not unique for either.
We've already,
I think it's just,
And
we've already
unclear.
locally contributed
I don't disagree. I'm just saying.
significant money.
I'm not disagreeing.
I'm just trying to figure out where my equilibrium is off, if it
Yeah.
is.
I think my point was more, we haven't
I'm not
had
saying
any.
that either of them is more or less worthy. There's a value to the town both ways, both projects. From a housing point of view, for people who need that for affordable housing, there's a value to the town for meeting the, whatever it's called, the affordable housing figures, 10% figures, and so forth. You know, and they're both good projects. I just have a concern that we're spending $60,000 more than we need to.
Yeah, and
If
I
we
wasn't,
don't- if
I
we
was
don't
just
need to,
giving the board the information.
Why would we? I mean, if the guy wants to sell you the car for $5,000 and you say, well, geez, I'm going to give you $8,000, well,
So both of these projects need money,
of course.
and they're both asking for it from different sources. Some of the same sources, but
So it's
multiple sources is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I actually don't, other than the scale, I don't see any difference in the concept. And if we were if we did not have funds available, then there'd be no funds available.
Right.
The fact is, anyone can put in an application.
And isn't that what I said a few minutes ago, that if we reserve some funds where we can, then we'll have monies available for another project from Habitat? 2 days from now, 2 years from now?
Perhaps. I just-
I mean, isn't there a value there to be thinking about?
You know, this is a really tough one for me
Really?
to have a discussion, yeah, because
Yeah,
I
okay.
really feel strongly, after listening to many, many people opine on what they would like to see in their community and how passionate they feel about affordable housing and how passionate they feel about what it should look like and where it should be, and, you know, a lot of passion all the way around. When it came right down to quantifying in a report what people wanted, they wanted 10%, certainly Maplewoods gets us there a lot faster, but they wanted projects that fit the scale, scope, and complexity of the surrounding community and didn't change. And that's what Habitat is doing. So both of these, very valid. I happen to think one fits the community better, but that's my own personal opinion. And I have, whether he came this year, he probably, I think Habitat is trying to do this obviously as quickly as possible. I don't think he'll start construction until, I don't imagine you can start construction. He has to do demolition until spring now. But for both of these projects, I presume the urgency is so that they can start whatever they need to do next as soon as possible. And by not providing.
So he still may want this money.
Well, it's in his pro forma. So if it were to be turned down, it would be totally up to him what he decided to do with it, but he still needs the 30,000 to make his number add up. He'll still need $30,000 somewhere.
60,000.
60,000, I'm sorry. And if if it's not here, he'll have to find it somewhere else in order to match his pro forma.
Okay, so it doesn't shut the project down.
I don't know that. I don't know that in either case.
Because we don't have him here to answer the question.
No, and I don't think, so the difference, again, is a $60,000 contribution towards building a project that's all built by volunteer, or substantially built by volunteers, so these costs go mostly for materials and, services that volunteers can't provide.
And it's good to be supportive of people who put their hands on the product afterwards.
Which
and
is
do something with it.
Their model.
Which I said I've done 2 of.
Right,
or
well,
worked on 2
their
of.
model is that you put, the owners of the property put, I
Yep,
think it's
it's not all just done
$400
by
of sweat equity.
Professional mechanics.
So, anyway, he needs the money, it's here. I
Right.
think we probably beat it to,
Yep.
beat it to death.
You got me convinced, let's go for it. Let's go
Now
for
I've
it.
forgotten, so do we have a motion to recommend favorable action?
Yes, you do.
And a second, because you graciously agreed to second it
That's
so we
right.
could discuss it.
So why don't
we
you
could-
put it up for a vote?
So, all in favor of recommending favorable action to number, help me, 5. Raise your hand. Habitat for Humanity.
Aye.
Opposed? None. Okay. Are there more before we go
Yes,
back?
7 and 8.
Sorry, I didn't mean to exhaust you on one thing.
No, that's okay. I find the whole issue of affordable housing somewhat exhausting. So now I've got 2 pieces of paper and I have to get back. So
We're going to skip over the community house
Oh,
because we
there's
just
one
need
more
that.
piece of information or something, yeah.
okay. What's the next one, Peter?
The $6,000 from the Open Space and Recreation Reserve for
Right.
the Open Space Trail Map project.
Right. Which apparently, I don't know what meeting I was in, it's very cool. I mean, just based on the input that someone gave about it being GPS,
GIS.
GPS,
Will they use GPS
to map it,
make
to make the map.
That's right.
Yes.
That-
But,
That's
you know,
right.
so
Alphabet soup.
very precisely located maps will be drawn
And these are for the trails in the town of Wenham.
in,
Yes.
what is it called? The Audubon.
Nope, this is for all the trails in town.
All the trails.
All the trails.
Maps for all the
I knew a
trails.
little bit about this already.
Again, after reading the 450, well, not all of them, but the summary of the 450 responses from the community on, which, again, opine on anything relative to open space and recreation,
Yep.
and I don't remember the numbers, but it was some very large number of people that felt that maps and trails were a priority.
We have all kinds of trails, so.
We do,
We ought to
more
know
than
where to find them.
I even imagined, although I will admit, as I think someone else did, to getting lost in one particular area near us because
Okay.
of a lack of trail
Why
maps.
don't you put a
So-
motion out there?
We have this on the warrant, and I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the sum of money for the trail maps.
I'll second your motion.
Any further discussion?
None?
If not,
Aye.
aye. And I'm still, oh, well, look at that. I finally turned to the right page. I knew it would happen eventually. So we have, that's the 6,000. Oh, we have the so-called
Park bench.
Wenham Lake Cedar View. This is my favorite one, actually. So
It's gotta
the,
be right on the trailhead where one of my Eagle Scouts did a trail clearing and.
well, this one is on Cedar Street
Yeah.
along,
Yeah.
and I actually didn't, yeah,
Yeah, do you remember Blake Denman?
I do.
Yeah, he
And,
did the trail out there. That was his project.
It's, so it's a request for $1,200 for purchasing and installing the so-called Wenham Lake Cedar Street bench, including all incidental and related expenses. Oh, this was the FinCom meeting. The only other piece of information that's not here that's probably in their application that I would add is the intention is for this to be a granite bench, which will require no future maintenance, which would have been a question that I had.
So this is all installed.
It's, I
Because
believe,
$1,200 for a bench
purchasing
is a
and
little
installing.
expensive, But,
And the material.
And the material.
yeah, it's material
Buying
and,
a good deal of granite.
yeah, I would think
I
so.
know that I have a bench that has been put up in someone's honor on my street, and it was
That's right.
beautiful when it
One of
started.
our scouts did that too.
Yeah, and unfortunately, it's wood, and it's,
It's coming apart.
yeah, so I think,
Well, thank you for mentioning
yes,
that. I
actually,
will
yeah,
see if we can find a
yeah, needs a little work.
support for
So,
that in the troop.
not to belabor that, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on the item number 8, $1,200 for the Open Space and Recreation Reserve, from the Open Space and Recreation Reserve for purchasing and installing so-called Wenham Lake Cedar Street bench.
I'll second your motion.
Can we just vote?
Yes, ma'am?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that's it. No, that's not it. That's it, except for the,
Excuse me?
except for the elephant in the room. So, last time we discussed this, and we probably have discussed this quite a bit, and I'm going to turn this to Peter for the result of this, but the selectmen, this is the motion to put on the warrant and recommend some action for the $750,000 request from Harbor Light. We had a lot of discussion, most of the discussion was around contingencies that the Board of Selectmen would like to add to contingencies that the CPC already had. To protect, I think it's fair to say, to protect the town, the community from just making sure that the project was in as complete, recognizing the fact that there were a lot of variables.
Yeah.
And trying to control for them. I'll just
A
make
lot of
it a general
requirements to
statement.
make sure they're met.
Right, and two in particular that we talked about last week had to do with acquisition value and also right of first refusal.
Yep.
And I have way talked too much tonight, so I'm gonna turn this over
Okay.
to Peter.
So, of the contingencies that were included in the article, the first four were included originally by the CPC. The only change that was made there, and this was following up on the discussion last week, this was a motion that was made, seconded by the board at the time, was changing the reference in contingency number 4 from the term sheet to the fully executed settlement agreement.
Right.
And so that change is reflected in the motion, recognizing that the term sheet, what's in the term sheet might not necessarily be exactly what is ultimately included in the settlement agreement. The next 4 contingencies that were ones that were newly introduced by the board last week, and we have since checked with town council on the wording and appropriateness of all 4. First one is including language back in about the right of first refusal. This is chapter land.
Yep.
And this funding appropriation is basically the way it was originally worded. It was set up such that the town would have to waive its right of first refusal before expending the funds. And in talking to town council, essentially, the town would not have the right of first refusal until and unless a bona fide offer is made on the property.
Yep.
And since these funds are, at least in part, intended to be used for acquisition, the developer wouldn't be able to put in that bona fide offer, therefore triggering the right of first refusal under 61 without having this funding in place.
Okay.
So the feedback based on that from town council was that that language should be eliminated, fully recognizing that element that's in play for this particular project could certainly be included in the grant agreement, and not including this language in as a contingency in the town meeting vote doesn't mean that the town would be waiving its right of first refusal in any form or fashion.
Okay, so the recommendation is to remove
Strike it
number 5.
in its entirety.
Okay, got it.
The next contingency is around acquisition costs being consistent with 40B regulations, and we had kind of, after the discussion, there was some general consensus around that particular issue. Again, after conferring with town council and diving a little deeper into the applicable regulations, the new contingency language is as follows, because I can't pretend to summarize it other than reading it. The acquisition value set forth in the final cost certification of the project shall not exceed the sum of the as-is market value as determined by an independent appraisal and reasonable carrying costs, which is consistent with the rules and requirements of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Basically what this means is that the developer has to go through an application and approval process by DHCD around the project generally, but specific to the acquisition costs. And as part of that, DHCD hires this third-party appraiser who goes out and determines the market value, not as a permitted project, but within the town's existing zoning bylaws by right. And then that number combined with their calculation for what a reasonable carrying cost is, and that's like 3 pages of DHCD verbiage that I won't get into.
Please don't. Yeah, right.
But this is something that DHCD is in the business of analyzing and verifying. So the combination of those two numbers, basically the developer can't purchase the property for any more than that amount, so that it protects us against these funds being used for an acquisition of a property that is above market value or above what we should be paying for it. So that was the verbiage to address that issue. The other two substantially town council was fine with. So 6 now, new number 6, talks about the building permit being applied for and received within that small window right before the year to maximize our protection under 40B, against unfriendly 40Bs, I should say. And then the last one, where the board ended up, was saying that the grant award of $750,000 would sunset 3 years after the comprehensive permit was issued by the ZBA, if a certificate of occupancy hadn't been issued by that time. But it allowed some discretion to the board if Harbor Light requested an extension and the board determined that they had made a good faith effort to advance the project in the meantime. So it set a deadline out on the horizon, but did give the board some discretion depending on what had happened in the 3 years.
Okay, got it.
And that is it.
All right.
So I only have one small, really small thing.
How small? This small?
Smaller than that even. The acquisition language.
Yep.
Exists in a document that has a name, I believe. I have it.
Yep.
I'm just wondering if it's most clear, and this comes into the form of a very small amendment, not to hold anything up, that is specifically cited. If everyone knows, if there's one document and everyone knows where that is, and there won't be any confusion, everyone who has to be involved, I don't have a problem with that, but I always feel like if we're pointing to a DHCD rule or requirement, maybe we ought to say where a person could find that.
Yeah,
a
so I
thought.
think my only concern there, because that was something I did talk to town council about, is that new guidance document was produced in December of 2014. And that wasn't there before. And it could be different later. So if we point back to it
I see.
and it no longer applies, then
Right.
we've basically taken away
Okay, I
that
see what you're saying.
contingency.
I see what you're saying.
Now, it-
'Cause
DHCD
they
could
change
issue a new
them any
regulation,
day.
and we want to just point back to the fact that DHCD has a process to evaluate, acquisition costs, and that it may change in a couple of years from now, and so we don't want to bind ourselves to that former policy.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so this article is not yet on the warrant. Is that correct? This portion of
This
this
portion of it.
article, number 3 in the CPA article. So, if it's okay, I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen place CPC article, oh gosh.
Yeah, right.
I don't remember what the CPC number, the actual whole article number is, but the article relative to CPC.
Was it 12?
Number 3, $750,000 for Harbor Light Community Partners Project, be placed on the warrant. So the motion is to place that article, that portion of the article on the warrant. Is there a second?
Yes. Yeah, yes, I second the motion.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
As, I guess I'll say as presented this evening, because it's
Yep.
the latest iteration. The second part of this is to decide whether or not, or to vote whether or not the board recommends favorable action. I will make a motion that the Board of Selectmen recommend favorable action on this article, on this portion of this, number 3, relative to Harbor Light.
Second your motion?
Do you have any discussion?
No, I think we've exhausted this one, too.
Well, maybe so. I just.
Unless you have
I do.
something.
I do. I just want to make a statement so
Sure.
it's clear.
Please.
I'm looking up so that it's clear.
Clear as mud.
I am not in favor of this article. And I'm not going to recommend favorable action on this article. And despite what people may think, at this moment in time, it has absolutely nothing to do with the project. I cannot imagine that responsibly we're needing to bring forward right now an article that has this many contingencies, hoping that some of them at least will be gone by town meeting. I just don't, I would feel a lot better about this if this was a clean recommendation and did not have all of the contingencies. And I agree with the contingencies, absolutely. If they weren't there, I'm not sure I'd be in favor of putting it on the warrant. But to recommend favorable action on something that I believe is far from complete, doesn't work for
I
me.
understand your concerns.
So that's all. I just wanted to get that out there.
We have been long controlled by the court process. Not anything that this board, this town could do about it. It was legal action brought by a dozen people who, in my opinion, have held the rest of the town hostage to a potentially good project. And now it's under pressure from a time point of view, because we're trying to meet the town meeting time frame at the same time. All of these other requirements needed to be dealt with. And I just trust that they will, and sometimes you just have to have faith that they will be followed through and will be completed. So I mean, how many times have we passed motions, passed article, passed things with, we trust that this will be taken care of by legal, or these other issues would come in favorably, supporting whatever the effort might be.
I hear you.
So.
I don't think we've seen one quite this complex.
Correct.
And I think I need to go on record as disagreeing with you. They don't think that this is a rogue group of 12 people. I may or may not agree with them, but they're our neighbors.
Well, I didn't say rogue. I did not use that term.
Have held the town back. I think pejorative terms here are not productive. These are people who have an interest in this, have an opinion on it, and and they're our neighbors.
Correct.
And the person who's making the application is not our neighbor. So I will just make that distinction, that I don't feel as if anyone has inappropriately held us back, and I'm not going to make a comment on whether this is inappropriately going to be being pushed forward. It is what it is. It's here before us now. I think it should wait. I think it should come before us when it's a little further cooked, but that's...
And then you would be in favor?
I'm not ready to make that statement yet. But I certainly would at least be making taking an opinion or recommending action on something that I knew what it was going to be, what it was going to look like, whether it was still in litigation.
Well, these same neighbors are now strongly in favor of it and have signed off on the concerns that they had.
Okay, that's not a true statement, I don't think.
It is not?
No.
Well, then.
Do you think that anyone who
I thought there was
settles...
a court document that they signed and agreed that this would.
So there, to be clear, again, mediation, if you've ever been involved in it, I don't know, I wasn't sitting in the room. As you know, the town is not a party to that mediation. I would not make the statement that either party that signed those concessions were strongly in favor of them. And I think one indication that that may be the case is that mediation occurred January?
Yeah, a month and a half ago.
Right? And we have not yet seen the settlement agreement, which is an indication to me that they're going back and forth, trying to hammer out I think, just speculation, the details. So to say that it's strongly agreed upon, that's...
Well, I mean, assuming it will be complete. And this is part of the criteria that you're concerned about.
Both sides will have made concessions.
So if it doesn't, the money doesn't go anywhere.
Right, but both sides will have made concessions.
If we believe the project is a decent and wholesome thing to do and helps us meet the affordable housing responsibilities we should have for our community folks, as you're describing, these are our neighbors and so forth. There's people in town who want a place to live in town that can't afford the $500 to $800 million homes.
Well, I don't want to get into a discussion tonight because we could have a very long discussion.
Of course.
About.
Maybe we should sometime.
Well, we should. we will, I think, at some point, talk about the substance, the actual project, and if you want to, and we could have a discussion and get some expert answers on what
to your point on mediation, I have participated in mediation many times, and everybody has to give.
Exactly, that's my point.
Or it never fails.
Right.
If it doesn't succeed, and you end up in court, and somebody else makes your decision for you.
Right, which is, I would imagine, is what was in their minds.
That's how our legal system works.
Right, and in any compromise, what is it that they say? The goal is for nobody to be completely happy or completely satisfied or completely unsatisfied, and I'm sure this is the case here. That's, so I have lots of opinions on the project, but I don't even know if I know what they are, because it's not clear to me what the project is. So
Thank you.
I'll reserve those comments. I'll spare you those comments later. Anyway, we have a motion, so we have this on the warrant now, and we have a motion to recommend favorable action by the selectmen.
Aye.
And was it seconded? Yes. So, all in favor of? Aye. All opposed? Aye. Okay. I know we're not done with the warrant, but I believe we have left ordering.
So my suggestion for tomorrow night is to circle back to those couple things that were outstanding that we can clarify and the board can take recommendation votes on, and then we can talk more high-level strategy on
Right, okay. And,
both within the CPC article and across all the warrant articles.
right, because there is, now that we know especially what they all are, and I'm hoping, I'm not hoping, I'm pretty sure that by tomorrow night you'll have a new document, version 7,592, that will just list the things that we do have before us. So we have one more piece of business, which is pretty important. We need to vote. We voted earlier to open the warrant. We've made some additions, changes, et cetera. Now we need your motion, or I can make it, or you can make it, to close the warrant.
Well,
We have it in the back
if we
of our.
close it, what about tomorrow night?
Then we open it and close it again.
Oh, oh, that's right, we did talk about
We're breaking all kinds of records, really, with this
Yeah,
particular
really.
town meeting.
stuff we
I
never
hope it's
believed.
not an omen. I hope by doing all of this up front, the actual town meeting allows it to go smoothly.
All
It's
right.
like planning a
I
party.
move the Board of Selectmen close the April 6, 2019 Annual Town Meeting warrant. You sure I shouldn't say just for today or something?
Well, we.
Never mind.
Each, one day at a time.
what
So
it says, I'll take it for
I would
that.
second that motion.
All right,
Is there any discussion?
none.
Would you like to vote?
Oh,
Shall we?
could we vote in favor?
In favor?
Aye.
Closing the warrant. I think the only thing that leaves is, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I would second
night,
that
everybody.
motion.
Thank you for hanging in there, ladies.
Back tomorrow night.
And